How to Win Friends, Influence People by Sparrowette. Beginnings. One beginning was 3 months into Naruto's training trip with Jiraiya. The Konoha spymaster received a pressing message from one of his spies in Tsuchi no Kuni. Naruto didn't know what it was about the pervert refused to tell him why he was left to his own devices and more importantly without any training for 2 whole months if everything went well. He didn't even know why Jiraiya refused to take him along, because the lazy pervert refused to cough up even that much. So he said Iwa was dangerous, sure, but how was it supposed to be more dangerous than Mizu no Kuni? They had already been there and that place was full of psychos. Naruto had had his reasons for this uncharitable opinion and it wasn't entirely because of poor Haku. During his first week in the country he had made a few shadow clones to help a fish merchant's cart up from the ravine it had fallen into. The merchant had offered him protection money and, when Naruto had refused, begged for his life, scared he had offended Naruto, and he kind of had, but any place where being nice to people got that kind of reaction had to be totally messed up in Naruto's opinion. And that had only been the beginning of it all. At least this is far from anywhere important. Even you can't make too much trouble here, Jiraiya said and ruffled Naruto's hair, making him huff in indignation and swat the hand away. Just so you know, that swamp village thing wasn't my fault. I don't care if they were high and mighty Kiri Chunin, nobody demands protection money from little flower girls. She was 10 years old for heaven's sake. He protested. Oh yes, that country had made an impression on him all right, just not the kind of impression Naruto would voice in polite company. But whatever Jiraiya was, polite company didn't enter into it. Those syphilic bastards of a plucked vulture and oyster with the shits, and they got their spines from the oyster and the vulture was a whore. If there was one plus side to the time he was forced to waste in every red light district they came across, it was that he didn't have to stoop to unimaginative four-letter words. If you say so, Jiraiya managed to say, and Naruto was sure that the hitch in his voice was a swallowed laugh. That made the lecture about remaining inconspicuous that followed less than effective. Makamura was a beach town in the southern tea country. Jiraiya said he had to check in with his informants there, but Naruto was sure they were really there just because the only country T had land border with was fire and it was just about as far as they could get from rain and sound. He could read map just fine, thank you very much. Blessed by a sunny, temperate climate, Makamura attracted tourists from around the continent. It had long golden beaches, a nice seaside promenade with luxurious hotels, posh restaurants and expensive shops, a war monument to the dead of some historic civil war, several big shrines and of course a large red light district with geisha houses, tea houses, uncomplicated whorehouses, bars and casinos. It came as no surprise to Naruto that the safe house Jiraiya tucked him into was in the far corner of the red light district, huddled between the wall circling a geisha house's garden and the seashore. It was small, but reasonably nice looking. What, no back gate? He asked and gave the garden behind the high wall a knowing look. Jiraiya thwacked him over the head. Behave, you. There's food for a week stored inside, be mindful of the traps. Your cover's a worker for one of the local merchants, he's my contact. I'll send someone from Konoha to help you stay undercover and keep an eye on you. Jiraiya gave Naruto the merchant's contact information in codes, and the codes he would recognize his backup/babysitter from. He left Naruto to sort through the traps that had kept the house untouched in such neighborhood. It took Naruto half an hour to figure out how to get past the seal on the door inside. He got scratched by one poisonous kunai and found himself hanging upside down from the ceiling. Kyubi took care of the poisoning, though it still turned his tongue purple and his urine blue. This was Naruto's first afternoon out in the big world on his own. And there was another beginning, the beginning before beginning, long before Naruto even became genin. The beginning Naruto didn't know had started anything. Middles. Another beginning was actually a middle 2 Kirigakure graduation escapees on the run. Mizushima Kanatsu was the eldest daughter of a prominent Kiri ninja family. Both her parents were jounin, likewise her uncles and aunts, and she was hailed as a prodigy. She excelled in kenjutsu and jinjutsu, she was good at ninjutsu and taijutsu, and she was passably good at information gathering. No one ever had any doubts that she would graduate. She was beautiful as well, her hair inky black and her eyes dove gray. She had money, she had 2 offers for her hand in marriage already, she was one of those people who had everything. Keed was another story. He was a clanless, nameless orphan who had signed himself for ninja life after his mother's death because it was the only alternative to living on streets. He was a passable student, but didn't truly distinguish himself in anything, staying in the middle of the crowd by the skin of his teeth and thanks to Konatsu's tutoring. He was frequently bullied because of his feminine name and his teachers didn't really expect him to survive. He only had one advantage: he was Konatsu's half-brother, and for all she wasn't supposed to care about the bastard son of her father, she did. She cared a whole lot. In Kirigakure, the graduating students were pitted against each other in one-on-one duels to the death, and so Konatsu and Kid found themselves standing at the opposite ends of an empty room. Konatsu wondered if her father was the one who had arranged for this, for Konatsu to end the life of the son he never wanted and never acknowledged. The proctor was standing with his back to Konatsu, redundantly going through the rules, and even though Konatsu couldn't see his face, she thought the line of his shoulders and the tilt of his head spoke of pity as he watched Kid. She couldn't afford pity, so she stabbed the chunin from behind. They then went through his pockets for money, ransacked the academy kitchen for as much food as they could comfortably carry, and ran for their lives. Incredibly, they made it into a seaport and into the first ship that left it. It was headed to a tea country resort town. "We will be all right, I promise. I'll protect you. As long as we have each other, it's going to be just fine," Konatsu promised her brother and smiled, but she was simmering with frustration at her own impotence. It was a miracle they had made it that far, and she knew it. "I know," Kid said and smiled nauseously. Part of it was the rolling, sickening way the ship bobbed up and down on the waves, but most of it was that he knew just how unlikely that was. But even one day of life was more life, and without Konatsu they would have put him into the cold ground of Kiri already. There was still life. As long as there was life there was hope, and he hoped for a miracle. One miracle had already happened after all. Ends. When Mizuki revealed himself to be a traitor, it was the beginning of one end. He had a lover, Ono Tsubaki, a kind, warm woman, and a loyal kunoichi of Konohagakure who found herself in a very difficult spot after his incarceration. The first stage was denial. There must have been some mistake, she thought. He could never, but he had, and she didn't know why. Was it for money? Had he grown that dissatisfied as an academy teacher? What it was that Orochimaru could offer and Konoha couldn't? What it was that was so much greater than life as a valuable Konoha shinobi, as her lover? Hadn't he cared any? Anger followed soon at denial's heels, anger for abandoning her, for spitting at her love and trust, and for leaving her to deal with the consequences of his actions. For the first few weeks she became an outcast among her fellow villagers. She was tarred with the same brush as Mizuki, the one who had sold them out for whatever reason. It was a legitimate concern that they felt, she knew that much. He might have taken her into his confidences, she might have been an accomplice, a spy left active even when he had been caught. After all, she had been the one closest to him, the one most likely to notice something was amiss. Knowing this didn't make her feel any better. She was interrogated rigorously, and even after she was declared innocent there was a black mark on her record. It wasn't in any official papers, but in people's minds, and if she hadn't already made a jounin, she probably never would have. "I have been thinking, maybe that was why he turned the way he did. I mean, I'm well aware it isn't an excuse, but I just feel the need to understand even a little," she told Yumino Irika, Mizuki's one-time best friend and a comrade in this mess, even though Irika was better off than she was. He had been the one to apprehend Mizuki after all. He was suspected when that missing nin killed his teammate with his kunai, and even though he was found innocent the suspicion lingered about for years and blocked a lot of advancement prospects. That might well have been the start. And it's a reason, but you are right, it isn't an excuse. If we excused him because he was treated unfairly, we would do grave disservice to those who also suffer prejudice, but never lose their integrity, Irika answered. They were eating ramen at Ichiraku's, and it didn't take a genius to know who Irika was thinking of. The heat of the ramen broth burned on her tongue and shame burned in her mind. She hadn't ever treated Uzumaki Naruto cruelly, true, but then, she hadn't treated him in any other way either. She hadn't given him the benefit of doubt he shouldn't have even needed. It was only now, after his bravery during the Chunin exam invasion and his retrieval of the Godame Hokage, that people were beginning to see their Jinchuriki in a favorable light. Having tasted the same bitter medicine, Tsubaki wished she had offered the boy just one kind word, even once. She had learned the value of those the hard way. She had bargained with any higher power that might listen that everything was merely some terrible dream, or even enemy genjutsu, but she was even past that now. She was merely depressed. "Have you thought about a change of scenery?" Irika asked her. He was looking at her worriedly and she realized that her chopsticks had frozen halfway from the bowl to her mouth. She took a bite and chewed on the noodles, not really tasting them. I hope you aren't suggesting I go missing, she jested, but it fell flat even in her own ears. No, but I could give you 2-month-long C-rank mission in T country, no hostilities expected. You could think of it as a paid holiday, he suggested. Tsubaki took the mission. She was sick of remembering training together with Mizuki, their nights together, the sweet words and kisses and the small, cruel things that occasionally slipped from his lips that seemed so obvious in hindsight. She was tired of looking at her friends with suspicion, wondering if Mizuki hadn't been the only one to harbor treachery in his heart. It was time to put an end to the chapter of her life named Mizuki, and 2 months of fresh air were just what she needed. Insides. The safe house that had become Naruto's accommodation was in much better condition inside than the outside had led him to believe. It had been built traditionally, with a hallway that followed the edge of the house, a small kitchen with a stove and a very small oven, a bathroom, an all-purpose room that doubled as a living area, a bedroom, and a dining room, covered by tatami and sparsely furnished. There was a small table easy to carry to the side, a bookcase, a chest and a few pillows to sit on, and that was that. He found musty-smelling bedclothes from the chest. Everything was dusty and his steps left clear footprints on the mats. Once Naruto got through the traps, some of them were ingenious and he was so going to learn how to set them back up. The next thing in order was to search for dinner. He went to the kitchen and started rummaging through the cupboards. There wasn't a single packet of ramen in the house. What sort of a sucky safe house is this? He grumbled as he picked cans randomly from the shelves and read the labels. There were cans of green beans, leeks and sliced water chestnuts. There were cartons of applesauce with seals carefully painted on top to keep the sauce from going bad, and canned peaches in syrup. There was canned chicken and canned tuna and several jars full of spices, and from the far end of the lowest cupboard he found a carton that read Mama's Better powdered milk. Naruto had a feeling this food supply would survive a small-scale apocalypse. But no ramen. Note to self, go shopping tomorrow, he muttered as he took a can of beans and a can of tuna to make ninja hash, not looking forward to the shopping trip. The shopkeepers always charged him more than other people and the customers would glare. Actually, things had gotten better after he had brought Bachan back to the village, but that just meant that now he didn't know when he would get the cold shoulder treatment, but no one here knew anything about him. All they would know what he chose to tell them. Happy with this revelation, Naruto cooked his dinner and ate it. After this, there wasn't really anything to do with his day except prepare his futon, and a new problem came upon him. Boredom. Naruto and boredom. Back in Konoha and halfway through the Tea Country Prefecture, Irika, Kakashi and Jiraiya felt a shiver go down their spine for no apparent reason. Naruto scoured the house for something to entertain himself with. There wasn't much except a deck of cards, and Naruto hadn't ever gotten through a single game of solitaire. The only person he lost to in cards was himself. He turned to the bookcase and looked what it had to offer. There were 2 Ikas, one with a man and woman in the cover and the second with 2 women, but Naruto had completely lost all the naughty fun he had at first gotten out of doing something perverted when Jiraiya had made him a proofreader, and now he just didn't get what was so great about telling the same plot 100 times with different names. There were a few romance novels, one book about poetry that made Naruto's eyes cross when he tried to read it, and several ninja manuals. There was one about making simple seals, storage seals and similar, a few about weapon maintenance, something about art of war that also made Naruto's eyes cross, but the last looked promising. From cleaning supplies to warfare, how to prepare your own explosives, a training manual in Kyakujutsu. 10 minutes and Naruto was hooked. He had only learned that explosions were something that came from exploding tags, and the simple instructions the book was giving him opened a whole new world. 10 more minutes and he was rummaging through the cupboards again, this time in search of the mentioned supplies. There was a bottle of bleach in the bathroom and the kitchen had hot plates, but there were no enameled steel containers, so that was one more thing he needed to shop for. The second recipe needed ammonia and iodine crystals. There was ammoniac for cleaning the toilet, but Naruto didn't even know what iodine crystals were. He hoped they weren't terribly expensive. Then there was the thing with rust and some other powders he wasn't sure where to get to make touch explosives. Why don't they teach this at the academy? Doesn't seem too hard, he asked of no one, and looked at the pots and pans at hand. He hadn't expected much, but this was promising to become a learning experience after all. Outside. Once the morning dawned, Naruto left in search of ramen and employment. The merchant Jiraiya had sent Naruto to was named Matsuzaki Ariko. The old man glared at Naruto when he had laughed at the girly name and promptly laughed himself sick when Naruto gave his own name. "You are living in a hell of a big glass house, ramen topping," he bellowed and clutched his stomach. Now Naruto glared at him, even though he felt this was something Irika-sensei would have said he deserved. "It's written with the kanji for maelstrom," he protested. The old man just leaned against the desk in his office and finally got his snickering under control. "Yeah, and mine's an herbal remedy," he said. He wore a stupid sunflower pattern yukata, and liked thwacking Naruto over the head with his cane. Naruto proceeded to sort him under the heading crazy old man in his mind, and they got along just fine after that. The job was paying, which was good because while Jiraiya had left Naruto traveling funds enough to last the 2 months, he had learned early in life that having a buffer never hurt. Their shop was located near the harbor, a good thing considering that the man sold all sorts of imported delicacies like coffee, chocolate, raisins and nuts, fresh fruits, cookies and cheese, and naturally all this was brought to him by ships. There had been a shipment just a few days before and the crates had been moved to a warehouse Matsuzaki had rented, and now they needed to be moved to the shop's storage rooms. "I can't afford to keep men on payroll so they can sit on their fat asses, so I hire them for this every time." "How many you need?" he asked and fanned himself with his account book. It was a hot day and promised to just get hotter. None. Just look at this Kage Bunshin." There were small puffs of smoke and ebbing, chattering noises as the number of Narutos at Matsuzaki's better delicacies shop was raised from 1 to 10. "And here I thought you were supposed to not let people know you are a shinobi," Matsuzaki drawled with a voice that could have beat out Suna for dryness. Naruto scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. "I can get around that too," he promised and applied henge. Now there was 1 Naruto and 9 of his fellow genin. No girls because girls didn't really do the heavy lifting in the city's world, and so he had to use Niji, Lee and this guy Janai from the Chunin exams, the one who chose not to complete the first phase so the rest of his team was disqualified, to buff the ranks. He felt kind of bad for making the clone look like that chicken, but not everyone could be a winner every time. And so Naruto and his clones got to work, ducking and darting and climbing and carrying crates between the warehouse and the shop. Kibatwo flirted with Najitwo to freak Naruto out, but as it turned out, freaking yourself out didn't really work. They had the same sense of humor after all. Everything went well until the very last crate of nuts, which Naruto carried with his own 2 hands. Some 50 feet into the busy hustle of the street, a man with a messy beard brushed past Naruto, hitting him hard with his shoulder and almost toppling him to the ditch. "Watch where you're going, punk," the man grumbled on contact, glaring down at Naruto from an impressive height. His biceps looked like whole hams were trying to mate under his skin when he moved his arms. "You're the one who pushed me, jerk," Naruto snapped back at the man, and then things happened really fast. The man moved to hit Naruto, and Naruto might just be a genin, but even a newly graduated academy student could have cleaned this guy's clock. Naruto didn't even bother doing anything fancy, just jabbed him hard in the stomach with the corner of the crate and marched on while the man was lying in the ditch, moaning. He was humming happily, and if people were staring at him, well, he was too used to that to even remember they weren't supposed to do that here. And being from a village with no organized crime whatsoever, he had never bothered to learn what that kind of tattoos and a missing middle finger meant. Hours. It was precisely 4 hours into his employment that Naruto became responsible for the shop. It happened like this: Matsuzaki was standing on old, rickety ladder to put new jars of fruit marmalade to the highest shelf when an old lady in posh, embroidered kimono walked in, and the lady was walking 2 little dogs with long, dirty white fur. The color was dirty white, that was, Naruto didn't think those dogs were ever allowed to get dirty, and he pitied them because forcing dogs to remain neat and clean all the time went against some inner dogness. He was crouching to put some crackers to the lowest shelf a bit behind the ladder, and the dogs run towards him. And the leashes of the dogs, which had been tied together so they could be easily held with one hand, were torn from the old woman's hand. One dog went from one side of the ladder and the other. The ladder fell and Naruto leapt to catch Matsuzaki, already congratulating himself for the quick save. But then Matsuzaki clutched his chest and his whole body jerked. Naruto wasn't a medic by any stretch of imagination. He could bandage wounds, of course, and set broken bones as long as the break was a clean one, and even do sticks as long the one being stitched didn't mind them being a bit ugly and uneven. But his poor chakra control had made learning medical jutsu an impossibility, and he hadn't ever shown any interest despite his one-time friendship with Kabuto, that rat bastard either, to tell the truth. So he did the first thing he could think of and ran to the hospital, carrying Matsuzaki over his shoulder. Matsuzaki's life was saved, which was good, and the old lady even paid the hospital bill as the whole thing had been her fault, but that still left the problem of what to do about the shop. You must rest, Oriko Baka. You aren't as young as you used to be, and you could stand to lose some weight as well. It was only thanks to the speed your employee got you here that you survived it all, a nurse with white yukata and angular, stern face told Matsuzaki. The old man gave him a dark glare from where he was lying down. Look, you evil old hag, he started, and the nurse promptly hit him over the head with her papers. Who are you calling old, you mummy? I'll have you knowing, I'll still be a spring chicken when you rest in your grave, she ranted, and Naruto tuned her out. They were obviously old friends, and the whole thing made him miss Sakura-chan a lot. Maybe he should write her, now that he was going to have an address she could write back to. That was a great idea. It was after a while that he noticed both the nurse and Matsuzaki turned to look at him speculatively. I could go to my niece, but can you take care of the shop? Matsuzaki asked him. Naruto gave him a winsome smile. I worked for a lot of shops back home, he said. He didn't say it was about D ranks because he didn't know if this nurse, Sakuya, was trustworthy, but Matsuzaki should know anyway, and he looked reassured. You can leave your foolish employer to me. I'm his niece's neighbor, I'll see to it that he gets plenty of rest, Sakuya promised and ruffled Matsuzaki's hair. Matsuzaki made an offended noise deep in his throat, but he looked kind of happy anyway. I'll do very good job, I promise, Naruto said. He hadn't ever been responsible of a whole shop alone, but he had been behind the counter and he could do accounting. He had done his own finances since he was 10 after all. So that left carrying things and protecting the place from robbers and stuff, and he could use those seals and traps that had been in the safe house before he went in. No criminal was getting in on his watch. Days. That evening Naruto set the traps and drew the seal carefully. He didn't really know why they worked as they did, but no knowledge of that was required as long as you weren't trying to create a new seal. Being able to perfectly accurately, and the word perfectly couldn't be stressed too much, recreate what you had already been shown was enough. The next day he went to the shop early to sweep a bit, only to find 5 thugs lying unconscious by the back door and the small window next to it. He didn't even bother with taking them to the police, but simply heaved them off to a stripe of wasteland overgrown with weeds between one street and another and was done with it. He then opened the shop for the day. And he found that wasn't the end of it. It begun just before Naruto closed the shop for a lunch break. The shop even had this cute little sign with a panda with a speech bubble, and he was just waiting for the 2 housewives and their children, a cute little girl with pigtails and a boy Naruto was sure was hiding a frog in his pocket, to leave. Then 2 men walked inside. One of them he recognized as the burly man from the day before, and he sighed. Why did people have to be so bad losers anyway? They were like Sasuke team. The other was a little shorter and a little heavier than the first, but they looked very similar. They even dressed alike and they had the same tattoos, and Naruto wondered if they were maybe brothers. But they were both missing a middle finger, and that was kind of a really funny coincidence. Now you are gonna get it, punk, the idiot from the day before growled. He was crackling his knuckles, but the effort just ended up looking funny because of the missing finger, and Naruto smirked. But his smile froze when the women flattened themselves against the wall and the little girl begun to cry. The idiot number 2 snorted, mistaking his reaction for fear. And a woman too, he started and leered at the women, but he never got any further. Because if there was something Naruto hated even more than inconsiderate bastards who run away to play sensei and student with evil maniacs who invaded Konoha, the evil maniacs themselves and the evil maniacs' evil, backstabbing medic Neens, it was people who bullied innocent civilian women and kids. The 2 men went down easily. 1 punch for each of them was all that was needed. It was a strange scene after that. The women in their expensive, pink kimonos were watching him with eyes as round and wide as plates, and the little girl stopped crying. Naruto flashed them a smile and made a peace sign. The little boy looked at him with hero worship in his eyes, and Naruto felt his heart swelling with some warm, funny, stupid happy feeling. I have a frog, the boy volunteered and stepped forth, taking the small amphibian from his pocket. His mother grabbed his arm and pulled him back, giving Naruto a startled look and stammering apologies. Frogs are awesome, Naruto agreed and kept his eyes on the boy so he didn't have to look at the woman. It shouldn't hurt so much, but it still did, though the boy's grin made it a little better. Even the little girl smiled and giggled a bit and Naruto gave her a candied apple, and then another to the boy so he wouldn't feel bad. The women made their purchases quickly and left, but that wasn't the end of it either. When it was time to close the shop for the night, yet another thug approached Naruto when he made a shortcut through a small, dark alley. It was a huge, bulky man with a missing tooth and again that missing finger, and now Naruto was sure. Once was happenstance and twice was circumstance, but 3 times was a pattern already, like Kakashi-sensei always said. The third man didn't give any more resistance than the first 2 had either, but it was then, of course, that 3 women in revealing clothes walked past the alley and one of them happened to look there. She shouted in fright. They all stopped dead in their tracks. They stared at the man on the ground and Naruto standing above him, perfectly unharmed and rubbing his head in a sheepish way. "This isn't what it looks like," he offered and tried to look harmless. Predictably, their reaction was to scream and run in the other direction for dear life. Naruto drooped. "What a lousy day this has been," he grumbled. Weeks. Makamura was a nice little town, Tsubaki decided when she walked the streets towards the safe house Jiraiya-sama had given her directions to. It was early morning and the chirping of birds drowned out the squeaking and rumbling of what few merchant charts made when they were rolled to their allotted plots for the day. She watched at the sea that glittered in the early morning sun and thought that maybe she would buy herself a swimsuit. This was shaping up to be a better and better idea by the minute. A paid holiday like Irika had said. Her only duty was to ensure that Uzumaki Naruto didn't do anything stupid and grandiose enough to attract shinobi attention. The boy's rambunctious nature aside, this was a country without a hidden village or any real political significance. This was the kind of place spies were assigned to as a punishment for messing up somewhere important. What could possibly go wrong? This was a question Ono Tsubaki regretted asking herself when she realized her charge was in the middle of a small-scale war with the local Yakuza. "What you think you are doing, Uzumaki? You were supposed to keep low profile, do I need to explain you what that means? And who is she?" She demanded answers from the brat sitting in the middle of the safe house's floor, bandaging the leg of a young woman. She was beautiful enough in that comfortable way that didn't leave anyone feeling intimidated, with brown hair and dark, pretty eyes in round face. It was not the moment to get interested in the opposite gender. In fact, she was beginning to wonder how he had survived to this age at all, let alone become a genin. "She's Miwa-chan, those thugs were beating her up." Naruto begun his explanation, but the girl laid a hand on his arm and looked Tsubaki to the eye. The sudden fierceness in the mousy girl's demeanor was surprising. "They were going to rape me," the girl named Miwa said quietly. "I'm a prostitute, I work for the Yakuza. They take most of the money I earn and they take me whenever they feel like it. Naruto-kun killed those men." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the intensity of it carried through and so did the grim satisfaction. Naruto looked at his hands like he had never seen them before and Tsubaki realized with a sudden start that it had been the boy's first kills. But the shadows were chased away and Naruto's eyes hardened. "No one who does that to other people deserves to live. Don't worry, Miwa-chan, you won't ever be going back to those people," he vowed. Many thoughts were chasing one another around in Tsubaki's head. The incredulous he was fighting Yakuza without killing them. What did he do? Arrest them? Was shoved away by the wistful that girl loves him and he has no idea, but what surfaced first was you will see that many people do so and live to do it again. The lecture was even part of the academy curriculum. Ninja Sex Ed covered the run-of-the-mill contraception, diseases and health risks associated with underage pregnancy, but also rape as interrogation tactics and prostitution as a part of infiltration tactics. This was the kind of world they lived in. "Well, I'm gonna change that because I'm not gonna change, believe it," Naruto exclaimed and hit the air with a closed fist. It made Tsubaki sad for someone other than herself, because some things could be changed by no one. But Naruto could save Miwa if Tsubaki let him. He was the kind of person who would. She remembered the cruel whispers that had always followed the boy, demon brat gritted between teeth, and he remembered the man who had lain with her under false pretense and how Naruto had been the one to catch him. It hadn't been rape, she had said yes every time and enjoyed it, but she felt violated all the same. And she had been suspected and blamed, Considered dirty, like many would consider whores dirty. Some would claim even in Konoha that it didn't count if you raped a prostitute. No one who does that to other people deserves to live. I was Mizuki's lover, did you know that? She asked. Naruto looked kind of squicked out, but also gentle? Kind? She wasn't certain she was reading him right. That must have sucked. I bet he was a bad kisser too, he said and startled a laugh out of Tsubaki. She wasn't a violent person by nature, her career choice notwithstanding, and she was a bit shocked to notice her knuckles were turning white. She purposefully opened her fists. Those Yakuza are lucky, Naruto-kun, she mused and looked out of the window, feeling loose-jointed and drunk. Mizuki had struck a fracture into her and she wasn't sure if Naruto-kun had just fixed it or struck her to pieces once and for all, but whatever the case, she had forgotten what it was to feel this good. Outside the sun had finally risen over the roofs. This will be a beautiful day to die. It had taken Saihara, the unquestioned leader of Makamura's dirty underbelly, years to build his criminal empire. It was destroyed in a week. And if Naruto dropped them off to the police and Tsubaki vented her frustration, he didn't seem to hold it against her. She was clever enough to never be caught anyway. Months. Time is a tricky thing, subject to perception. Sometimes days and weeks will fly away like hours and days, brief, fleeting moments. Sometimes even minutes can stretch into eternity, like Naruto could assert from his experiences from the academy. 2 months isn't that long time, objectively speaking. Matsuzaki Ariko would attest that it took him barely any time at all to realize that the goofy, friendly facade that Kid Jiraiya-sama had left with him presented was entirely false. The chief of police would claim that those were the longest 2 months of his life and he never received so many gray hair because of one person before, while the prostitutes who at first meekly crept in to meet the new management would say their Naruto-kun left all too soon. They were, after all, very soon former prostitutes. Even the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Naruto's journey begun when 2 missing nin from Kiri stepped off the deck of a merchant ship, looking for employ and a place to hide. Years. The rumors were all over the place. Konatsu and Kid didn't even need to go searching for them. The word was that the entire criminal world was in wild disarray, that old man Saihara had been dethroned and all his men were either dead or in prison, and that this was whispered with excited, worried, odd tone. It had been real ninja who did it. They were sitting in a dango diner and slowly eating their lunch, but in truth more interested in what the small group of men sitting next to them had to say. I heard that Matsuzaki-san is involved somehow in this affair. Who would have thought? He was always so respectable. Person 1 spoke with obvious relish. He had red hair, mole in the left cheek and distinctive Adam's apple. I hear the new boss is so young he doesn't even shave yet, that blonde kid, remember, said person 2. Brown hair, brown eyes, buck teeth. There are 2 of them, they are identical twins. I saw them in the docks yesterday. But I don't think they are really ninja. I mean, they didn't have those bandanas with the metal plate, whatever they were called again, said person 3 aka the good-looking one. And what normal people run over rooftops? Person 2 asked with a dry voice and took a gulp from his sake jar. Konatsu and Kid shared a look and finished their meal, leaving the diner. So, a missing nin organization has taken over. Do you think they recruit? Kid asked, trying to hide his trepidation. He wasn't the most squeamish person. There was no one in Kirigakure stayed squeamish for long, but some of the rumors about the sort of missions missing nin got involved in, starting with assassinating little babies and getting steadily worse from there, really gave him the creeps. But Konatsu's eyes were shining. If they have only just taken over, there must be much work to do. I'm sure I can get us in, and then we'll have safety in numbers, she said, gratified. Mizushima, Konatsu and Kid had their expectations about how the world worked in general and the ninja world in particular. Those had been built upon years and years of ruthless training and eyeing their classmates with cold, and in Kid's case, uneasy, eyes, knowing only half of them would survive. Years and years of watching little kids beg for food until they barely even noticed it, by yearly death patrols to weed out all Kekkei Genkai users and good, unselfish people like priests and volunteer workers at homeless shelters found mugged and sometimes dead had left them with firm opinion that you could trust only your family and oftentimes not even all of them. Then they walked into Matsuzaki's Better Delicacies shop and the blonde, grinning boy behind the counter made that certainty crumble. Red. To say that Tsubaki was less than charmed when Naruto Koen returned to the safe house with two missing Nin in tow was an underestimation. Missing Nin were generally speaking scum, the ones who couldn't keep their violence aimed towards acceptable targets or the ones who sold their loyalty. Kirigakure was a case of its own, as about half of the people who left that place were merely political dissidents or victims of severe abuse of authority, but they were desperate and all too willing to do what it took to survive, even kill people who had considered them to be their allies. The heart of the average Kiri missing Nin was dead 7 times over before they left the borders of their country. So this isn't a missing Nin operation? The one who had introduced herself as Natsu asked. Tsubaki was very sure that wasn't her real name, but she answered to it easily enough that it must be an old alias or a nickname. Konoha has interest in tea country? I bet half of my graduating class couldn't tell tea country from the map. No, I was just dumped here until my sensei gets the important stuff done, Naruto Koen answered, displaying unusually good sense in not giving his sensei's name to these people. He wasn't lying about Konoha's general disinterest in tea country either, though he exaggerated a bit. They learned about the Big Five in history classes in detail and C ranks covered their smaller border neighbor quickly enough, but tea country was stable and peaceful and prosperous, not the sort of place that created many opportunities for ninja, in other words. Ah, I fear we have been followed, or we will be in short time, the boy who trotted after the girl like a faithful puppy said. His name was allegedly Katsu, but he was more visibly uneasy with it than the girl with hers. Speaking of the girl, she glared him a little, but he raised his chin, defiant, and the girl hid a sigh. So he had more morals and the girl was resigned to it, reluctantly accepting. This bit of information could be of use. Can't be worse than Gato or Zabuza or that Dota Kazuhana creep that bothered Yuki Haim. Naruto Koen waved his hand. Tsubaki paused to consider that Naruto Koen had contributed to the fall of 2 tyrannical regimes before he had even made it Chunin, but before she could be properly bewildered the girl called Natsu put her teacup to the table with a loud clink. So that's where I had heard your name before. They named the Great Naruto Bridge after you, she said, and the boy called Katsu looked at him with admiring eyes. Natsu seemed to be considering something and then things just clicked for Tsubaki. She hadn't even expected Naruto Koen to be able to protect them, not after actually meeting with him. She could tell he was inexperienced and she probably believed Tsubaki to be merely a chunin since she followed Naruto Koen's lead in this protesting. Notwithstanding, she wasn't precisely trying to make her objections stick, and Natsu had intended to use the two of them as a distraction against anyone who might have followed her and her brother and escape while the dust was still settling. It wasn't a bad plan, but it made Tsubaki see red. That someone would use Naruto Koen like that. She only realized she was releasing a good deal of killing intent when both Natsu and Katsu turned to her, their hands at their weapons. Tsubaki took a deep breath and forced the red across his vision wash away. All is well, she told Naruto Koen and managed to smile. Many would have found it more than a little sad that she was taking her clues from a genin, and genin such as Uzumaki Naruto, but Tsubaki had made her decision when she first bared her blade and she wasn't the type to change her mind according to every rouge blast of the wind. She would wait and see where this unique nindo of Naruto Koen would take them. And if these two thought her to be chunin rather than jounin, well, the easier it would be for her to kill them. Tsubaki was willing to give this alliance a chance, but she had sworn to be nobody's fool ever again. Orange. Miwa had been a geisha student once. Her father had sold her to a geisha house when she was 5 years old and she had worked her way up there from a servant girl to a student and even an apprentice geisha, Maiko. It was simply her bad luck that the geisha district her geisha house had been in had been an illegal one. The unlicensed districts were the most popular. There was less standing in ceremony and more fun. Often a man couldn't find enough room to sit on the floor of a tea house, this was how popular they were. But while a girl could earn well there, she also had to live in fear that the authorities may decide to close the unlicensed district and then she will have to find herself a new geisha house. This was the draw of luck they did and Miwa couldn't. If she had already been a full-fledged geisha she probably could have found a place that would have taken her in, but no one had needed an extra Maiko and she had to become a prostitute, make clouds and rain with any man who would pay for her. She wasn't the only girl in this predicament either. Her best friends Aiko and Yuriko were thrown out with her. It was harsh life and she didn't expect to live long. Some disease would surely take her soon, if she didn't starve once whoring cost her good looks or somebody didn't kill her. Then Naruto came and everything changed. He killed the men who tried to rape her and took her to his house, caring for her. He and the older woman, Tsubaki, took over Makamura from the horrid man who had claimed the city as his turf, and suddenly she found she wasn't a whore anymore. We could convert it into an inn and a bar, Naruto-kun said as he eyed the house critically. You can sing and play something, right? Since you used to be a geisha, he asked, and Miwa couldn't find it in her to remind him again that she hadn't quite been one yet. It wasn't as if Naruto-kun cared. He simply found her cool. Aiko and Yuriko were as well, they can sing and dance there. I would like to help you personally, if you don't mind, she proposed and blushed, hoping she wasn't too forward. She so wished to become part of his life. Naruto-kun was a ninja. The mere thought made chill go up and down Miwa's back. The shinobi were the stories of her childhood and the rumors important men would whisper to each other while you filled their glasses. Whispers of assassinations and kidnappings, beautiful, seductive women who could wring every secret out of a man and then leave him hanging, sometimes literally, men with so terrible jutsu they could kill whole armies. Miwa had always feared ninja. She even feared Tsubaki-san a little bit. She never would have thought she would ask to become a secretary/assistant/anything to a shadow killer. But Naruto-kun was kind and sunny. He didn't even dress like a shinobi, but wore bright orange and blue that clashed with it in a particularly eye-catching way. Naruto-kun was her new hero, just as orange was her new favorite color. Yellow. Makamura had recently turned into a right battlefield. There was a boy who was said to be a shinobi of some sort. That mere word was enough to send shivers down even a brave man's spine, and a woman no one had seen up close, a kunoichi, and maybe his lover as well, though that rumor made the chief of police feel something akin to pity for the boy. But it isn't an excuse. If I excuse one who does terrible things because he is used, I offer insult to those who suffer the same, yet don't turn to crime. There was a boy, there was a woman, and then there was a criminal empire in ruin, Yakuza in custody, Yakuza missing, and several Yakuza corpses, not to mention a very suspicious testament, but most infuriatingly no proof whatsoever that these people had killed anyone. But now the violence seemed to be over. It was a beautiful day and the chief of police hadn't spent a waking moment with his wife for 3 days. Today was his day off, come hell or high water, ninja invasion or a plague of locusts. Good. Grunted Yamamoto Takumo, smiling down at the letter he'd been reading. He was sitting on bench in a park next to a Shinto temple, under the shade of cherry trees. Good what? Asked Reiko, looking up from the little princess she was holding in her arms. Ruka was 3 months old and the apple of their eye. For the longest time Reiko had trouble getting pregnant and they had almost given up hope. My cousin Ichiro has finally decided to propose to Hamasaki Kiku. He plans to ask her to marry him next week at the Mermaid Festival at the Seashore Palace. Seashore Palace was the finest and most expensive restaurant in Makamura. Takumo couldn't even imagine how Ichiro had managed to get a reservation for that day. Reiko grinned at him. Then shall we gather chrysanthemums, dearest, for their table at the festival to help Ichiro gather his chrysanthemum? She asked coyly. It was a beautiful day, golden with sunshine and peaceful. Of course it had to come to an end. There was the sound of a girl crying and Takumo turned his head to look. He saw a girl in yellow yukata, standing under red torii gate, gazing up and tears streaming down her cheeks. A cat had climbed to the lower lintel of the gate and meowed there, obviously afraid to climb down. The girl was tugging the orange sleeve of a young boy and Takumo thought his heart would stop. The boy had bright yellow hair. The dominant hair color of people of tea country was black. Some had dark brown hair, or even light brown, but yellow was exotic, strange. Even in a tourist city like Makamura, blondes were a rare sight. He couldn't see the face, but the girl tugged again and Takumo stood up, alarmed, hoping Satu had the sense to. The boy known as Satu Naruto walked up the beam of the gate like it was flat ground and not in fact at 90-degree angle to the ground. He quickly picked up the cat and jumped down with a somersault that would have left Takumo with a twisted ankle or possibly even broken neck like it was nothing, and handed the cat to the girl. She shouted in delight and pressed the scruffy black thing to her chest, and Satu ruffled her hair, smiling beatifically. Takumo felt his insides twist. The ones who make a show of being affable are always the worst, his Shursho had told him once. It takes a certain kind of man to murder in cold blood, but the kind that murder in cold blood and then hold charity auction, make nice with cute kids and save kittens is worse. They have something loose in here. He had twirled his finger at his temple. Takumo couldn't remember a single instance his Shursho had been wrong. An Kiku equals chrysanthemum green. When Marino Idate heard that Makamura had been overrun by 2 missing nins, his first inclination was to bang his head against something hard. Idate didn't like the ninja world even at its best. Once his heart was gnawed by the green eyes beast called envy, but Naruto had helped him regain some of his lost self-respect, and winning the annual race and a few kind words from his brother had given him the rest of it. And even when looked at objectively, life was just that much better when he didn't have to pit himself against tests engineered to make the majority of the attendants fail and be used by someone who would use him to do their dirty job and throw him away like trash later. All right, maybe he was still just a little bit bitter. Idate had waited with bated breath after Ibiki had taken Team 7 back to Konoha, but when no one appeared even after months to demand that he join Konoha again, he had allowed himself to relax. Some say that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, but the fact was that Idate had walked both sides of it and he preferred his civilian life. Ibiki should have changed his status from Kia to MIA at the very least. He hadn't, and Idate was eternally grateful for that, but now it seemed that trouble had found its way to the peaceful tea country after all. It was after a day of careful consideration that he approached Wasabi Jirocho, the man who had taken him in from the ditch and treated him as his own son. Wasabi Jirocho was a big man. He had a bit rough-hued but kind face that seemed to proclaim that, like a mountain, he was here to stay and couldn't be moved. He was sitting behind his desk and sipping tea from a delicate china cup that almost completely disappeared into his big hands. His simple gray kimono and his austere room, void of all unnecessary cluttering, were like his own reflections. He wasn't a man fooled by vain gilding or cheap glittering. He smiled to Idate when he came in, and like always it made him feel like a little better person than he was. "Father, I'm sure you have heard the rumors from Makamura as well?" He begun, and when Jirocho nodded he continued, "With your permission I would go there and see how much truth there is to them." "Why bother? Makamura is far from here?" Jirocho asked, but Idate got the feeling that he wasn't necessarily disapproving, but simply curious. "I know how these things progress. If Makamura becomes a center of missing nin action, it will invite hunter nins, and hunter nins in turn will invite spies. And before we know it, this isn't just the problem of one town, it will spread slowly but surely over the whole country." Tea Country was a gentle land of lush rice fields and fertile orchards, harbor cities that bustled with life, and smaller, idyllic country towns. It was not perfect, certainly, but what place was? If some missing nin thought they could drag Tea Country down to their level, well, they had another thing coming. But what could you do? You left that life behind a long time ago, and I know you have only practiced running. Jirocho didn't look happy, but he hadn't said no either. "I'll just ascertain that it's true and not just another tall tale about Yakuza turf war. If it's true, then I'll make a risk assessment and we will know how much help we need to request from Konoha. Maybe if they were lucky they would get Naruto's team again." Naruto was a bit of a loudmouth, but he had a good heart. Actually, Idate was a bit worried about him. So pure heart in a hidden village was just begging for trouble. "You would call for Konoha?" Jirocho asked with a mild voice, peering at Idate over the rim of his cup. They had not talked about Ibiki and how he was alive, how it influenced Idate's view of the shinobi world, for quite some while. This conversation had been coming. "I'm not happy to deal with them," Idate answered honestly. "But now the situation is still salvageable. Better a team from Konoha now that the countryside overrun by foreign agent the next year. I'm not going to leave you for them," he didn't say out loud. "I just want to protect our home." Jirocho smiled to him and set down his teacup with a clink. Idate packed his rucksack and put on his weights. As far as shinobi went he was a bit green, but he could do reconnaissance as well as anyone. Naruto had shown him that you had to fight for what was yours, and that was ninja way even Idate could get behind. Blue. Naruto was busy rearranging the Yakuza business. Tsubaki-chan had given him a name for the crazy missing finger people so the girls could earn their living honestly when the first man walked in. Miwa-chan had promoted herself to his personal assistant and was doing the actual job behind the counter while Naruto sat on a stool by the chocolate aisle and went over the books Kanatsu-chan had stolen for him. Naruto was very good at math. This wasn't because of any natural aptitude, but thanks to several obstructive, petty Konohan bureaucrats who had made it necessary for him to pinch every penny while growing up. The casino boat, the loot from Saihara's safe house, and the bordellos that he would turn into inns with said loot could easily make a man rich, but becoming rich wasn't his goal. There employing all the girls was, and right now there were still 24 he couldn't find anywhere to put. But Miwa-chan trusted him. He couldn't let her down. "Excuse me, Sato-sama?" The man he had at first taken for a customer asked as he slowly dithered closer to Naruto. He was a middle-aged, plump man, dressed very smartly. In his hand there was a brown envelope. "I am," Naruto admitted cheerily. People didn't call him Sama every day, or ever, really. Jiraiya had picked Sato Naruto for his name because Sato was the most common surname in Tea Country and because he didn't trust Naruto to remember to introduce himself with fake first name. He would have remembered, really. But Naruto was a kick-ass name and he didn't want to lose it even for a short while. That was his story and he was sticking to it. "I came to, greet and congratulate you for your, quick promotion to your current position. And also, I think we can reach an arrangement? So that everything will go smoothly?" The man stumbled over his words. He didn't sound terribly sure of himself. "Who are you and what sort of arrangement are you speaking about?" Naruto asked and closed his account books. Maybe the man was Matsuzaki's customer and wanted to make a big order? He didn't know what other promotion the man could be referring to. "I am Suzuki Eiji, the owner of the Billow and Wind, a restaurant by the promenade. I trust that if I, pay for protection I'll have no need to worry over, unfortunate fire-related accidents." The man thrust the envelope to Naruto's hands and backed away a few steps, looking at him expectantly. Naruto might have asked about the way he looked at him, hopeful and nervous at the same time, but this was when he was hit by an epiphany. Konoha, like all ninja villages, had a very effective fire brigade. It was necessary when fire jutsu and different kinds of explosions were part of the trade for a good portion of the villagers. He had already learned during the short while he had traveled with Jiraiya sensei that this wasn't so in the civilian settlements. In small villages and towns whatever police force the place had covered fire fighting also, and in big cities the responsibility was given to one of the samurai families, and the way they handled their duty varied from place to place, but one thing all these makeshift fire brigades had in common: no water jutsu and pretty bad mobility and reach, what with the need to haul huge water tanks by carriage or the need to make bucket chains from the nearest well. Makamura was undoubtedly the same. He could find a fire brigade. This man was willing to pay him for it. He could use the pay and part of the Yakuza treasure to make some sort of fund for the girls' wages. He would have to check the local laws, but he was pretty certain he could make it tax deductible. Kanatsu-chan and Kid could become the overseers and trainers, and the water jutsu would be good for self-defense too. This was a great idea. He congratulated himself. The pale man, Suzuki, nodded and backed out of the shop. Over the course of the day 17 public-minded citizens chipped into the fire brigade fund and Naruto had a great time designing the really cool uniform with Miwa-chan. It was blue because obviously firefighters dressed in blue, tight so it wouldn't get caught anywhere and covering so it would protect the skin. Do you think midnight blue or navy blue would look best? Or maybe dark blue or even ultramarine? Miwa-chan pondered and tapped her chin with the pencil. "There is a difference?" Naruto asked and rubbed his head. This had to be one of those girl things. Purple. The end of Naruto's 10th day in Makamura, after the obligatory shopkeeping and the much-preferred fire brigade planning, saw Naruto dabbling with explosives. Miwa-chan was his faithful assistant as always, and Tsubaki-chan was hovering in the background, making sure he didn't accidentally blow the safe house up. His guide in all things that go flash and bang in the night? The totally awesome from cleaning supplies to warfare, how to prepare your own explosives, a training manual in Kyakujutsu. Kyakujutsu, the art of gunpowder, had become a little old-fashioned since the explosive seals had become so common and many scoffed at it as quaint and cute. But Naruto had made do his whole life with what he could scrape together from the teaching his sensei deigned to offer him in the academy. Irika sensei had been fair at least, but Naruto had been only one of his students and admittedly a bit more maintenance than the poor teacher's time had allowed. Besides, there were many places that would confiscate any seals they found on a person, but who would bother to confiscate bleach and hot plates? "Let's start easy with the eggshell smoke bombs," he proposed, rummaging through the cold cabinet. The safe house didn't have anything as modern as a fridge, but it had a cold cabinet where ice would be stored in the middle of an insulating seal array. It would take a week or so before the ice had melted enough more needed to be bought, and it kept the perishable food fresh. From there Naruto picked a dozen of eggs. "Let's see, we'll need sugar, fertilizer with saltpeter and a few other ingredients for this one," Miwa-chan said as she leafed through the book. Also, cotton wool, aluminum foil and a pan. We'll be ready in no time at all. Why you bother to make bombs this day and age? Konatsu-chan asked, and Naruto wasn't sure if she sounded curious or doubting. Most of his practically all-female enterprise, he and Kid the only exceptions so far, plus Ariko who didn't count because he was Naruto's boss, lived in the ex-whorehouse dorms, but Tsubaki-chan had demanded that Konatsu and Kid remain under her watchful eye and Naruto didn't see why not. Besides, Tsubaki-chan was great and she probably had a good reason. Because many places check you for seals, but no one cares about eggs and fertilizer. I'm Konoha's #1 surprising ninja and proud of it. He cheered and Konatsu-chan made a small aha noise deep in her throat. After this they got to work. Miwa-chan caramelized the sugar and Tsubaki-chan insisted in being the one who distilled the saltpeter out of the fertilizer because apparently just pouring the thing into the sugar as it was would have been a bad idea. Naruto was the one who mixed that with the rest of the ingredients and put the end product, a sort of thick paste, onto the folio to dry while Kid made himself useful by pricking a small hole into the eggshells and sucking them carefully dry. It was apparently something he used to do a lot as a kid for some strange reason and he had learned to like the taste. After this the dry paste was powdered and poured into the eggs with a thin straw, after which a string was added for a fuse and the hole was sealed with cotton wool. In the end the kitchen counter was full of various pans, glass jars and spoons, plus a Primus stove, and they had 12 innocuous-looking eggs sitting in their cartoon. Now we try this out, Naruto decided. He carried one egg outside and they all were watching with various states of interest as he carefully lit the short fuse and jumped back just before the fragile eggshell exploded. There was smoke. Surprisingly lot of smoke in fact, considering how small the egg had been. The book had said that the more sugar, the more smoke and Miwa-chan had to have been generous with it. The egg bomb filled the darkening front yard with a mushroom pillar of pale purple cloud. Miwa-chan was coughing and Konatsu-chan nodded appreciatively. Not bad. You can buy sugar and fertilizer everywhere. Now her voice was somehow sly like it slithered its way inside the ear, but the grin that slowly broke out reminded him of Sakura-chan when she was feeling evil in the best possible way. This would be even cooler if we used something bigger than an egg, like a hollowed pumpkin. But why is it purple? Naruto asked. The book had said that the smoke was supposed to be white. I guess that's from some chemical residue from something in the fertilizer, Tsubaki-chan speculated. And the next time we can do something that really explodes. Naruto jumped up and down with anticipation. All in all it had been a good evening. Brown. Afterwards Morino Idate thought that he should have guessed the moment he heard the name Naruto. Granted, these people called him Satu, but how many people in the world would saddle their child with a name like Naruto? A name like that simply begged to be spelled with the wrong kanji. Nevertheless, he didn't make the connection as he circumspectly eavesdropped on a man in the local police's blue uniform conversing with a man in rough-spun brown clothes in a small harbor bar. It was a rough place for rough people, but Idate hadn't yet forgotten his lessons in how to fit in. I saw him at distance once, a pretty short guy, but he beat those thugs up like it was nothing. I heard that cream-ass chocolate Chandler Matsuzaki's involved. Who would have thought? He was supposed to be so respectable, the unshaved man spoke with obvious relish. Idate leaned back a bit, sipping from his mug and sighing, pretending to relax. The bar was a pretty miserable place, a watering hole with tables darkened with age and walls darkened with smoke from the train oil lanterns and no windows. It was like the color brown had decided to launch an attack to suck all joy out of the world. It was the sort of place where all drunks were either sad or angry. Did you see him kill any of those thugs? The police officer asked with a hopeful voice. Idate saw from the corner of his eye how the man shook his head. Nah, I ran like hell. Saw one of them the next day, with a bruise the size of a soup bowl on his cheek, he grunted and downed his mug of ale. This short exchange was enough to lead Idate to Matsuzaki's Better Delicacies shop where the girl at the counter, a cute one with pretty brown hair and pleasant face but stern eyes, gave him an answer to a question he hadn't even asked, much to his embarrassment. Walk down the Candlemaker's Street and down the stairs that lead to an empty stretch of beach, you may meet Naruto Koen there right now. I advise you to not try anything stupid, though. You wouldn't like the results. These words were uttered with absolute conviction, along with coldness that practically dripped ice fern to the floor. He nodded and said his thanks, leaving the girl in the shop that smelled pleasantly of cinnamon and peppermint. It was a pity that she was involved in such shady affairs, he thought. And wondered despite himself what her name was. The girl's advice and the salty sea wind led him to the old red granite stairs and the yellowish-brown beach. It was rather rocky, which was probably the reason tourists hadn't invaded this stretch of sand and seawater yet. Standing on the uppermost stair, he saw a group of people. They were all rather young, though the age varied from the tween to the later 20s. It was a gaggle of women all in rather simple yukata, forming a wide circle around three figures. There were dark-haired girl and boy dressed in blue and a boy with bright daffodil yellow hair wearing grab-you-by-the-eyeballs orange jumpsuit. That could only be one person in this whole world. "Naruto, what the hell are you doing here?" he shouted and ran down the stairs. The mass of people in simple pale blue and dim green opened to let him through, and he found himself face to face with one grinning Uzumaki Naruto. "Hey, Idate. It's great to see you, what are you doing here?" "We are training my fire brigade." Naruto gave him a blinding grin, but the females were closing in on him with flint in their dark eyes. Many were pressing their hands into fists, or spreading their fingers like claws. "What it is that you want with Naruto-kun?" one of them asked. Idate got the impression that if he gave the wrong answer now this whole group would try to claw his eyes and probably his heart out as well. What he made out of the explanation, once he managed to calm them down somewhat, was that these people would be a fire brigade, that this place was now completely Yakuza-free, and that Jiraiya the Sannin had left Naruto alone here for whole 2 months. Something like this could only happen with Naruto. But he could deal with 2 months. Idate had no idea where people had gotten the idea that Naruto was a Yakuza leader, given that the idiot was terminally incapable on harming a caterpillar unless it first committed a murder of one of his friends, but just 2 months and this circus would leave the town and country. That was harmless. "We met a little while ago when he helped me. Can I do something for you?" he asked from the group as a whole. And if he was thinking of the fierce girl with the chocolate hair in the shop, it was no one's business but his own. Black. Week 2 was almost up and Naruto had decided that he was having way better time than he would have with Ero-sensei anyway. Idate had taught the girls self-defense the last 2 days, and Kanatsu-chan and Kid had taught this simple water jutsu called Suetun Mizurappa that was a little like Sasuke team's fireball jutsu, except it made you spit water instead. So far Naruto was the only one who had learned it, but the girls were beginners. He was sure it was just a matter of time before they got it. He was sitting outside the house in a folding chair, munching one of the apples left over from that day's experimentation, and thought that he should go meet Eriko and maybe bring him the apple dumpling Tsubaki-chan was making from the carved-out apple flesh. Kanatsu-chan was having hand-to-hand practice with Kid and they yelled at each other, making great leaps around the yard. The apple was tart and the sun was warm. Of course something had to happen. He saw Kanatsu-chan and Kid dodge before he saw what they dodged. 10 sharp icicles as tall as Naruto's arm was long struck the ground where the 2 young ninja had just stood the moment before, sinking deep into the ground. At their wake a tall man in blue kimono with a striped undershirt and a mask with blue swirl dropped to the ground. His posture was lazy in a way that reminded Naruto of Kakashi-sensei, shoulders relaxed and posture loose, but there was a sense of danger that just clung to him. But while Kanatsu pulled her blade and Kid shouted for Tsubaki, in Naruto's eyes the picture of the man overlapped momentarily with another figure, a smaller and slimmer one, standing on a tree branch. Haku in Hunter Nin costume, but Haku was dead, and so was Zabuza. "You kids got further than I thought possible. But now it's time for you to die." The unknown shinobi's voice was flat and bored as he positioned his hands for making hand signs, but waiting for his opponent's first move. He was mocking Kanatsu-chan, Naruto realized, telling her she didn't stand a chance and could just lie down and die now. And if there was something Naruto could be trusted to absolutely, undeniably and forever reliably hate, no, you won't. Your village is a hellhole, they are better off here and you aren't touching them. And who are you to tell other people they suck when you are such a happy evil minion anyway? His fingers moved with practiced ease and the man didn't even have time to speak, if he even intended to speak, before the yard was swamped by 50 shadow clones. They all jumped as one against the man. After that it was tightly contained chaos. The man struck 7 clones down with water bullets and brief flashes of impact and pain flashed through Naruto's mind, followed by a sliver of black, but he didn't let it stop himself. He got a punch through, the man blocked 3 clones and kicked him and they were again apart, in a, well, if not sea then at least a good-sized puddle of yellow and orange. Konatsu-chan took the chance to hit the man with the same jutsu she had tried to teach to the girls that very day, but it hit the great oak behind where the hunter Nin had just stood. They all darted around each other for a moment as they analyzed each other. This was when 3 apples flew unerring towards the man in the air. He took a mocking step to the side and gave Tsubaki-chan a mocking nod. "The first thing you happened to hold, I presume?" he asked. And Naruto was angry, but he wasn't so angry as to not notice the way Tsubaki-chan's eyebrows went up. It was a sight to see. There was an explosion that broke every window in the house. The ninja had dodged, but he had to pull a short blade midair to meet Tsubaki-chan's. 2 water jutsu flew at him at the same time, but the man dodged them nimbly, landing on his feet. The ground under them had turned to slick mud and Naruto's foot slipped on it. "What was that?" the hunter Nin asked, and for the first time he sounded rather rattled. "How you managed to fool me with Jinjutsu?" "It wasn't Jinjutsu, it was a cute and quaint custom," Naruto shouted, threw himself forward and made a movement to punch the man in the face, which provoked a reflex of blocking the said punch. But that couldn't sadden him much now his bombs had been vindicated, so ha. Kid was the next to strike with his kodachi, Konatsu-chan right at his heels and several Naruto clones gave them back up. Black flickered across Naruto's vision as the clones died, but Kid didn't die so that was good. Tsubaki-chan engaged the enemy now and steel met steel which clangs that echoed right down to the roots of Naruto's teeth. But he wasn't sitting on his ass either. As he finished flicking his fingers, he called out the name of his technique. Kuchios no Jutsu. Pouring as much chakra as he could into it, Naruto summoned forth Gamaken, the great magenta toad the same size as Gamabunta who appeared directly above the hunter Nin. He almost got out of the way. "You seem to have a situation here, Naruto. I hope I can be of some modest help," the forever polite Gamaken greeted his summoner, turning his head and apparently trying to figure out what and where the situation was. It was an odd scene. The strong, old oak had snapped under the great toad like a matchstick and a curvy branch of it had protected the hunter Nin from turning into paste. Mud had splashed everywhere and Naruto was covered in it from head to toe. The tree had luckily fallen not over the house or the geisha house next to it, but towards the road. The Naruto clones were all gone and he was blinking the jet-colored darkness of death from his eyes. The rest of the wet, dirty fighters had pressed tightly against the house as the yard was just big enough for the great toad warrior. The hunter Nin groaned in pain and defeat. "What are the neighbors thinking about us now, I wonder?" Tsubaki-chan contemplated, and her voice was the only dry thing in close vicinity. White. A giant toad had fallen on top of him. Doihara Taiki, Shrike, could barely believe his own memory even though he had been stripped down to his underwear and tied tightly up. The loud, blonde boy in Kill Me Orange was apparently Jiraiya of the Sannin student. Konoha had some interest in Mizushima Konatsu and her alleged half-brother, or possibly boyfriend, and he could never tell his superiors what he had learned. Somehow this didn't make her feel the anguish such thoughts were supposed to. He just felt kind of bored and numb as he wondered if he would be tortured for information here or shipped to Konoha to Marino Ibiki's tender care. "Hey, I have a question for you, evil minion-san." When the bright form of his captor trotted to him, Taiki thought his question answered. The smile on the boy's face was much too wide to mean any good, and the way his quarry glowered from the other end of the room surely meant they would love to offer their assistance. Codename Shrike, Jounin, registration ID 01554. His voice was clipped, stern. His mask had been taken from him and he felt near naked, but he would never give his name, let alone anything more incriminating. The boy blinked, and if Taiki read his body language correctly, not really Satu was more bemused than anything. "That's nice? But about my question," Satu, for lack of better name, continued his original trail of thought. Codename Shrike, Jounin, registration ID 01554. He supplied again and took a deep breath, preparing his body for a blow, most likely nothing truly damaging at first. It would begin with beating and sleep deprivation. "Yeah, you told me that, but what I want now," his intrepid interrogator was beginning to look frustrated. Taiki took that as a small victory. Codename Shrike, Jounin, do you like apple dumplings? Satu shouted over his litany, red-faced. Taiki's tongue froze in his mouth as he tried to wrench his thoughts to the new rails. Apple dumplings? Where did apple dumplings enter the conversation? And dear Cammy, why? They are good enough, I guess, he answered nonchalantly. It was enough to get Sato to grab one from a nearby table and push it into his mouth. It was hot and sweet and he had hard time swallowing it. Sato rambled on about how he had at first offered the dumplings to Gamaken. The toad of awesome Taiki could hear the capital letters, but Gamaken had declined and now they had enough for everyone. Silence followed this and he didn't break it first. Why you are Hunter Neen anyway? You don't look evil enough to like it in Kiri. Is that it, you became Hunter so you wouldn't have to spend time in Kiri? Sato speculated and it made Taiki feel unease, and then anger because of the unease. He hadn't ever thought of his career choice in those terms and he wasn't going to start now. Where like entered the equation. I am Kiri's property, no more and no less, he reassured himself. Like his country was during the winter, colorless and featureless as the snow covered the world, he was snow white and snow cold, with little but his registration ID to tell him apart from 100 others. He had a function to perform and before this unfortunate incident he had performed it without a flaw. He had hunted his every quarry down, even his 2 genin teammates, and their red had mixed with the winter white. No one who graduated from Kirigakure Academy could ever be sentimental. So what of it if he sometimes felt like he had died a while ago and just not noticed? Not you too. Just like Haku was, what it is with that place? Sato groaned, though the question wasn't really addressed to anyone. Taiki briefly wondered who Haku was, but didn't ask, and then Sato continued already you know what, you need some attitude adjustment. This is for your own best. So you insist on being property, fine, then I'm stealing you. What? Just a single word. He couldn't even manage a questioning note to tag to the end of it. Colorless. The beginning of the story was a situation in IWA and a boy whose parentage really would be better not discovered or even suspected there, but that was only the beginning of one story. The stories of different people are intertwined and branching, before they go their separate ways again, they overlap and share side characters like friends share a bento box. And when one story is just beginning, another has gone on for a good long while. A question: what color is a chameleon in a mirror? Kabuto didn't know the answer, but he was starting to suspect that he had no color left at all, like an old shirt that had been washed too often. He was a loyal shinobi of Konoha. He was also a loyal shinobi of the root, and that was a whole another cup of tea, even though the two weren't mutually exclusive. He was a loyal shinobi of Kyumo and Suna and Kiri, except not really, and it was getting so bad that when he got up from the bed every morning he had a moment when he didn't remember who he was supposed to be loyal again or who he was supposed to be. Or what the difference between loyal and traitorous had first felt. It was an unnerving sensation, like all his joints were loose and could dislocate any moment, only these joints were all in his head. Something needed to be done. Kabuto received an answer of sorts from an old shinobi in one of Kiri's bars. The man was drunk, which was part of why Kabuto approached him in the first place, all the easier to cast that small piece of genjutsu on him, the one that disturbed the conversion of short-term memories into long-term memories. It wouldn't do for that man to wonder later why he had asked such a question, after all. The other part was that the man had served in Kiri's counterintelligence for years and there was a fair chance that he might say something applicable. In another life this man wouldn't have been alive at all, and Kabuto would have asked someone else and received a different answer. But in this life the gruff man sat there, melancholic and drunk and alive, and he gave Kabuto a look that might have been almost pitying. You are too young to make that kind of career choice, brat. Go play ninja with your genin team, he said and sipped his sake. Okay, so I'm too young to do that yet, Kabuto acquiesced with respectful ease. But what would I do, if sometime I was deemed worthy? He kept his body language open and eager to please. Keep your body open, that sounds obscene, Momo had laughed. She was an orphan from the Red Lights district, but that was of course long before they learned how to not find amusement in anything because amusement was distracting, and his eyes had just the right bit of hero worship and not too much sense. There was a disconnect between the naivety the broadcasted and the kind of question he had asked, but the man was drunk. If you can't trust yourself to remember who you are, pick someone to remember it for you and do whatever they think you would do, the man grunted and shooed him away. Kabuto left, his mind weighting possibilities. No one en route would do when they could barely remember who they were. How could they form an acceptable baseline for Kabuto? Someone loyal, someone who wasn't damaged goods yet. someone from the uppermost leaves of Konoha to remind the roots what they were doing the dirty work for. Someone who embodied the idea of Konoha, yet who would be approachable and responsive to his advances. He returned to Konoha not only with the required intelligence, but also an idea. He had figured out an S-class secret on his own. He knew whose son Uzumaki was. Friends. When Naruto became 5 years old, he got a new friend. His name was Kabuto, and he knew everything about everything, or so it seemed like to starstruck Naruto back then. The first time he met the older boy, it was well past the dusk, and Naruto was sitting in a swing in the playground near the orphanage. He had overheard some older kids that day when he had snuck out of the orphanage. They had been clan kids, dressed like their dads in wire mesh and ninja pants and dark shirts, only without weapons, and they had argued how their curfew was the most unfair thing ever. "It would be so neat if we could just sneak out after it's dark," one of them said. He had wild, mousy-colored hair and a small puppy in his arms. Naruto had once asked for a puppy, but the matron had just laughed at him. Can you imagine? No one would know. That night Naruto snuck out through the window. It was first story, so it was easy, and went under the gate to get to the street. It was really easy, and he didn't know why the older boys thought it was so difficult. But then, he didn't get what was so fun about playing after dark, except that no one came to push him down from the swing. But then the boy with gray hair came to talk with him, and he understood it perfectly. Nighttime was a great time to make new friends. It was the first time when he wanted to play ninja that someone said yes to him. "First we must make drop bags," Kabuto told him. "What's a drop bag?" Naruto asked. He was walking with Kabuto down the street to the part of town Hokage Gigi had told him not to go to, but even though he felt kinda bad for disobeying Hokage Gigi, he went because he didn't want his new friend to think he was a baby. Drop bag is an emergency pack where you keep weapons, clothes and money, and you hide it in a secret location so that if something happens and you have to leave the village in a hurry, you don't have to leave empty-handed, Kabuto explained. The way he played ninja was different from the way the other people did it, but that was just cool. The first time Naruto met Kabuto, they just played ninja. They played surveillance on a warehouse and had to make notes on anyone who came in or went out. It wasn't anyone interesting, just men who carried a lot of crates, but Kabuto told him to imagine they were secret weapon crates, and that was exiting. Naruto couldn't write yet, so he just pretended, but Kabuto made real notes. After that they made plans to steal the weapons and blackmail the owner by taking pictures and threatening to send them to TNI. Naruto didn't know what TNI was, but it sounded scary when Kabuto threatened imaginary people with it. He didn't just have to imagine those people either, Kabuto could make them visible. That was called Genjutsu, and it was a totally kick-ass ninja art. It was a fun night, and even though he was really tired the next day, it was so worth it. The second time Naruto met Kabuto, he was asked a lot of funny questions. "Do you know what a chameleon is?" Kabuto asked him. He didn't know, and Kabuto told him it's a lizard that changes color to whatever it is on. That sounded really ninja-like to Naruto, and he said so. "True, true." Kabuto laughed, but it wasn't happy laughter, more like a dog's bark. "But what color is a chameleon that's on a mirror?" "What color am I?" Naruto gave this a lot of thought. Kabuto had silver hair and really pale skin, his clothes were blue, and in the dark of the night he looked like a shadow and a glitter of moonlight, but Naruto didn't think this was about that. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that this was really, really important to Kabuto, and he had to get the answer right. Friends came through for friends. "You are friend-colored," he said, and Kabuto smiled to him in a way that looked a lot friendlier. Encouraged, Naruto went on, "And you are cool-colored and lots of knowledge-colored too." And Kabuto stood straighter and pushed the glasses up his nose in a way that looked really wise. Naruto saw Kabuto 5 times before he went away in a mission for a year. He saw Kabuto twice after he got partnered with some guy who was a medic nin and taught him to be a medic nin too, but Kabuto had a lot of missions and couldn't spare much time to play with his young friend. After that Naruto saw him for the first time in the Chunin exams, and things went to south really fast after that. He had pretty much forgotten the whole drop bag thing, but after trying and failing to retrieve Sasuke, he went to check their secret place under the Hokage mountain the moment they let him out of the hospital. His bag was there, but Kabuto's was gone. It didn't hurt quite so much as Sasuke's defection. It didn't hurt quite so much as Haku's death had. It made a close third, though. Enemies. Uzumaki Naruto was an idea that worked. He gave Kabuto a lot of colors, and while none of them were colors as the word was conventionally interpreted, he was satisfied with them. Friendship, cool, knowledgeable, secrets, fun. He became a lot better at faking sanity as accepted by the norms of the hidden leaf after that. Maybe, he thought, just maybe he wasn't wholly faking it when he smiled to a vendor who gave him an extra apple and complimented his friendly manner. He felt warm and free in his action in a way he hadn't for a while, like he didn't have to measure every action before he took one. Friendly colored friendly worked, he learned, with a great big number of people and in most situations, and even on a mission, smiling and being polite unnerved his enemy more than his threats ever did, so it worked out. Conflicting signals, one of his senpai said. Kabuto was simply happy to have a script he didn't have to deviate from. The last time Kabuto saw Naruto before leaving for IWA. They played ninja only after the darkness had fallen, to protect Kabuto's face from becoming linked to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He had a feeling Danzo-sama wouldn't like that. This time he employed a small area genjutsu to help them play recruiting for a spy organization. What he used was a real simulation, and Naruto, he noted with some amusement, was actually devastatingly good at recruiting, even though he didn't seem to fully realize the way he took advantage of people's raw places. When I'm big, I'm gonna have my own secret ninja organization. And then you can be part of it too. Naruto crowed after the play had ended for the night. Is that so? Kabuto asked, smiling and ruffling his hair. Naruto made a small protest and squirmed his way out from under his hand. Yeah, and you have to promise you will be part of it. It's one of your colors, you know. Always keeps promises to friends' color. Naruto stated imperiously. He seemed to enjoy the right to dictate Kabuto's colors. So I am, then, he affirmed and nodded his head, trying to recall when was the last time he had been asked to give promise. En route he was given a lot of orders, but no promises were expected of him. Promise implied trust, and Danzo-sama trusted no one. The last person he had given a promise to had been Nono. How long had it been since he last thought of her? I promise that when you found a secret ninja organization, I will join it. He didn't feel disjointed anymore now that Naruto knew who and what he was for him. That was worth any promise. He was aware it wasn't quite healthy to be so dependent on the perceptions of another, but it was healthier than what he used to be. He even started to dream on Nono again, of her smiles and the smell of freshly baked bread on her hands. In another life he would have called Nono a mother. He wondered at times what had come of her. Yakushi was her surname and she had let him use it as his own. So Yakushi Kabuto went to IWA and found he had enough of a human heart for it to break. Nono, he could barely believe that of her. Nono was one of Danzo's. But Nono had loved him, she hadn't wanted to give him up. She had tried to buy him free, by taking that one mission. Yakushi Nono was double-crossed, killed by the same son she had tried to free, and what was left of Kabuto's sanity gave spirit at last. For the first time in his life Kabuto had an enemy he shared with no authority. Enemy was a color like the tang of blood on tongue and a not so cold it burned lodged within the heart. Naruto hadn't given him loyalty for Konoha as a color, and so Kabuto wasn't bothering with that loyalty. Orochimaru offered him a chance for revenge and he took it happily. His new master often spoke of his true colors, the snake Sannin, Danzo, Sasori, they all had him, or thought they did with great amusement, but this was a secret Kabuto kept from him. His color was a friend, Naruto's friend. He truly didn't see being in Naruto's enemy's service mutually exclusive with that friendship. What did enemies and allies matter? But there was something he was as well. He was one who would have to keep a promise he had given to Naruto. Orochimaru, after all, had asked him for none. I promise that when you get a secret ninja organization, I will join it. Lovers. The people of Makamura thought that Naruto-kun was a Yakuza boss, strong as a monster and obviously some kind of evil genius to have taken over in less than a week, albeit his evil was somewhat diminished by his tendency to be polite to women, his fondness of little children, and the way he never actually terrorized anyone who didn't go out of their way to terrorize or arrest his precious people first. This was nothing new, and Tsubaki was beginning to learn this kind of odd situations as something inherently Naruto, the same as taking pity on and taking in potentially dangerous and very desperate Kiri missing Nin. Naruto argued 2 out of the 3 didn't really count as missing Nin because they hadn't graduated to become ninja in the first place. She was sure Kirigakure didn't care. What was new was that she was due to some inexplicable, communal caprice thought to be Naruto's maul. What is wrong with these people? She asked Kid-kun, the person with the bad luck to be in her presence when she overheard a man warning his friend from hitting on the Yakuza boss bird. She ain't worth that. Their delusions about his moral character aside, Naruto-kun is 13. She hissed in annoyance. It was true that in most places, Konoha included, genin were considered legally adults, but there were different degrees of legal and that just wasn't. Or if it was somewhere, the legal system of that place was in serious need of revamping. People tend to have kind of lurid imagination. I mean, there were lots of people who whispered I was servicing Konatsu in return for her tutoring back in Kiri. Neither of us is 12 this day, and I'm not entirely sure all of them were unaware we are siblings, Kid-kun commiserated, and Tsubaki had to concede with an inner wince that accusations of underage sibling incest prostitution were about on par with pedophilia. They were walking down the street towards the shop that had become their base of non-existent operations simply because the little safe house couldn't house everyone involved at this point. Now that Tsubaki had become aware of the rumors circulating, she noticed how many people actually nodded to her when she walked past, and she remembered the bargains she had gotten for the food and practically everything she had shopped for in Makamura. None of the nodders, some whom nodded so deep it wasn't a nod anymore, but a bow, were tourists either, she noticed. All were locals. Besides, they think we are Yakuza. I guess high moral standards aren't really expected of us, Kid whispered and shared a look with Tsubaki that said things. This can be used, it said, we get things cheaper and no one messes with us, and maybe we really could do something illegal if we can speak Naruto into it because money's always good. It was a very pragmatic look, a Kiri look on the face of a boy much too young to be so jaded, but then, that was Kirigakure. Blood on the water and cruel smiles hidden by the mists. To the winner go the spoils, Tsubaki mused and freaked herself out just a little bit. Because while most of her hoped to any deity who might listen that no one in Konoha ever heard of this, another, small, petty part wouldn't have cared about the malignation of her character quite so much if only these rumors could have reached Mizuki, if only he could have come to believe that the one who beat him had gotten his woman. It was only now that she realized to how great extent she wasn't over him and his betrayal yet. The critique of the loan economy is that we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like, but what are we criticizing when the case is that we are ready to have people whose morals we deride to think ours are low as well? She wondered. Kid made a small sound at the back of his throat and gave her a long look, and Tsubaki realized she had asked it out loud. Family. Matsuzaki Eriko was a man who liked his comforts. He was comfortably wealthy and had a well-established business that gave him respectability. He had a nice modern house with all modern comforts Tea Country could offer, no buying ice from the ice vendor to keep his food cold, oh no, and no need to buy coal to keep his house warm. He didn't have kids, but his sister had, as well as grandkids handy whenever parental mood struck him and he felt like spoiling someone a little rotten. Then there was Sakuya, a widow of an old friend of his, who lived next door to his oldest niece. They had been flirting for a while now, and who knew? The days went past, all similar, all peaceful. Or they used to go in such manner. Now his precious comfort zone had been shattered into 100 little pieces, and the worst part of it was that a pretty big part of the blame lay with him. He should have known better than to allow himself to be drawn into ninja business, but it had gotten him such a good shipping contract, and honestly, nothing of importance ever happened in Tea Country, in Makamura even less. It was a tourist trap with no strategic value, no natural resources, and it was part of no important trade route. If his delicacy trade wasn't the biggest thing going on, it was pretty close. Just yesterday he'd had to explain to his nieces, his nephew and Sakuya that he wasn't part of any deals with Yakuza, honest, it was just ninja, but they are the nice guys, honest. That hadn't gone well at all. In a way his heart condition and enforced rest was even a blessing. It gave him a good reason to stay home. He didn't want to know what people were speaking of him. And today, just to add insult to injury, Satu Naruto had come to visit him with his posse. There was an older woman, though young still, with brown hair, a vest of some sort and stern eyes. She was keeping a suspicious eye on a man in yellow yukata that seemed a little small on him, like it wasn't his own. A girl in strange ninja-looking blue clothes complemented the picture. So this was Naruto's family, or what passed for one in the ninja world. A squad? Minions? A flock? Hi, Matsuzaki, it's nice to see you are sitting up and stuff. Naruto greeted him. Eriko was sitting on his old, ratty, comfortable armchair in his living room, sipping iced tea. It had been a better day than the previous, but of course nothing that good could last. Naruto pushed a paper bag into his lap, grinning like a loon. There are apple dumplings, we had a lot of applesauce because we made bombs. This is Tsubaki-chan, she's my senpai, and Miwa-chan, she's my assistant in all things, and Shrike who isn't telling me his real name yet, he was a Kiri hunter nin, but I stole him, he gave the introductions like they were supposed to make sense. Oriko gave what he heard all the contemplation he could bear and pressed his face in his hands. I don't even want to know. Strangers. The following is a transcription of a conversation between Sata Naruto, S, and unknown male 2, U2. The conversation took place in front of Matsuzaki's Better Delicacies shop. Unknown male 2 is approximately 25 years old. Tall, 6 foot and a few inches, with lean build. He has short dark brown hair, long nose and a little rounder jaw than usual of T country's citizens. No visible scars or other distinctive marks. You two, why are you doing this? S, why am I doing what? You two don't play stupid. Why you care enough to try something this stupid? I'm a complete stranger to you. I was your enemy. S, ha. You said was. Not am. You two, a slip of tongue, why am I even explaining anything? What is your interest in me? S, you know, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. Besides, we have met so we aren't strangers, but friends already. You two, isn't that a decision that requires two people to make? S, remember. Stolen. You two, as though I could forget. Why? That question can't be too much to ask, surely. Why? S, why are you still here instead of, I don't know, baking a file into a cake? I mean, not like it would be that hard to up and go. You two, it's morbid curiosity, nothing more and nothing less. S, whatever works. At least you two, it's not working. S, you know, Irika-sensei always said that resorting to raising volume is a sign of losing an argument. Give in to the happy side of life. We have ramen. And apple dumplings. You two, you are the least reasonable individual I have ever had the misfortune of conversing with. At this point S and you two entered the shop and I heard no more. Questions, what has been stolen? You two appears conflicted in regards to working for S, I'm advising careful contact. He may agree to testify in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Who is Irika-sensei? More research about backers is in order. Were the capital letters really necessary? You had to be there, boss. The windows rattled. Teammates. It isn't easy to think in straight lines in a world that thinks in circles. Naruto knew that people often thought he was a little simple, but it wasn't that. Things were simple and people insisted on making them a lot more complicated than they were. Take, for example, him and Kyubi. Naruto wanted to be loved. If he hurt people, he wouldn't be loved, so obviously he wasn't going to hurt anyone who didn't really have it coming. People should think that they didn't want Naruto to hurt them and thus not treat him badly, but so many people failed common sense forever. They were lucky Naruto was the sensible type. Even Irika-sensei didn't quite get it, though he had come close. Being happy was better than being unhappy, obviously, so Naruto was happy. It wasn't always easy, but hey, the only good thing about easy was that it was easy. Easy wasn't synonym for happy, and it wasn't like his whole life sucked or anything. Just some people in it, and if those people included S-class criminals, hey, neither person nor S-class criminal was a synonym for life. Trying to explain things like this to Shrike was ridiculously complicated, but that was nothing new to Naruto. Straight lines and circles. A wasp zigzagged its way next to Naruto's ear and he waved it off briskly, hopping a little. Shrike gave him a look, but hey, Naruto knew those were really mean-tempered and would sting you just for fun. He had even used some for anti-Uchiha pranks before the massacre, good memories he now told Shrike. Wasps didn't fly in a straight path, they sort of zigzagged in patterns that kept changing, which made dodging them difficult even for Sharingan users since they were used to dodging straight-line projectiles. And a whole nest of wasps, now that was a proper comeuppance. That guy totally deserved it, he kicked a little civilian girl's puppy when it grabbed his pant leg. And don't look at me like that, it was fun. But then, Naruto had already noticed that Shrike was really bad at enjoying his life. Do you want to be unhappy? He asked. There were, apparently, people who liked being in pain. He had read that one manuscript for Jiraiya when his proofreader had quit, and he had at first thought it was about Umbu, but then it had gotten seriously weird. He really could have gone through life without learning what masochist meant, but at least he now knew what the nut was that got screwed wrong in Sasuke team's brain. Only without the sex part, hopefully, because yuck. I wasn't unhappy, Shrike insisted. Naruto had sneaked them both out of the safe house because he had a feeling Shrike wasn't going to feel comfortable if Tsubaki-chan was glaring at him, and so they were sitting on a bench in a park. It was a pretty place, with almost overgrown paths and a shrine nearby. The trees were looking kind of sad. Naruto thought it might be because of the heat and no rain, but the tall red and yellow and orange flowers were putting up a good fight, and he wondered if anyone would mind if he took a few with him. Tsubaki-chan would be mad later for ditching her, and so would Miwa-chan, but sometimes you had to accept that people were going to get mad at you. It was for a good cause. But you weren't happy either, and isn't not happy a synonym for unhappy? Naruto asked Shrike. Synonym was a surprisingly useful word. It made explaining these things a lot easier. Red rose to the older man's face, and it reminded Naruto of Irika, except not. Irika flushed red, but he smiled when he did it. Shrike's eyes glittered like pieces of funny-colored flint. Why? You care? His voice was rising to a shrill falsetto now, almost unmanly, but something of it really reminded Naruto of Kakashi-sensei's voice when he told his sensei about Sasuke and the Chidori, and that sent something cold up and down his spine. But if there was one thing Naruto wasn't, that was a coward. Look, it's not like I just grabbed you because you can't get something for nothing, and I wanted you to not be so screwed up, so I had to give something in exchange. We are teammates now, Naruto said, and because he just knew that Shrike was going to be difficult, he continued, I have a group of people who work with me, so I have a team. I stole you, so you are now part of the team, and that makes us teammates, so deal with it. I'm not gonna stop sheltering you, and if you want to join the fire brigade or do something else, like take up interpretative dance or something, I'm gonna support you, and that's non-negotiable. There was silence at first, and only wind rustled in the trees. It smelled like the sea, wet like Kiri jutsu, and really, really free. My name is Doihara Taiki. A straight line trumps a circle. Every time. Parents. It was yet another perfectly beautiful day in the perfectly wonderful beach resort town Makamura. The sky was blue and the sea was even bluer, the birds were singing their tiny hearts off, and the golden beaches were filled with beautiful and some not so beautiful, but no one counted that women in tiny swimsuits. There were about 200 Narutos in the city at the moment, doing this and that in the two huge ex-bordellos to change them into actual inns. The casino boat had been good for use as it was, but the interior decoration of a Yakuza cat house left a lot to be desired. Tsubaki wasn't out practicing with the fire brigade, though she would have liked to be, for water jutsu had never been her strongest suit, and some of the things Taiki-san knew were just plain wicked. She wasn't with Naruto either, though she liked to keep an eye on him and guard him from harm. Ono Tsubaki was busy writing a report. Naruto was only answerable to Jiraiya for now, but she still had to contact Konoha, and there lay a problem. She was pretty sure Konoha wouldn't approve of what was going on in Makamura. She munched on a sweet cinnamon apple dumpling while she eyed the intimidatingly white paper. It was ironic, but while Naruto's favorite food for all times was ramen, and there was indeed more instant ramen in the house than Tsubaki would have thought necessary to last out a month-long siege, he had gotten his friends/comrades/followers completely addicted on apple dumpling. He was surprisingly proficient baker in addition to the #1 most surprising ninja. I would love to say this makes more sense in context, she thought, but on reflection it didn't. It was just Naruto all the way. Tsubaki was certain that Naruto wasn't doing anything that was explicitly forbidden, if only because no one ever thought it necessary to forbid making legal business, founding a fire brigade, fighting Yakuza, or talking foreign shinobi into defecting, and certainly his current commanding officer hadn't done so. It was only in Naruto's tender care that this became a rather epic case of implicitly forbidden. And Tsubaki wanted to see this through. It was maybe she felt a bit maternal. Naruto had no parents and no one knew who they had been, though the logical assumption was that they had died when the Kyuubi had attacked Konoha. If Naruto had a father figure, that would be Irika, and if not for the strange, she didn't know how to best describe it except maybe by calling fealty. The best way to describe what Tsubaki felt, some people's sick assumptions aside, would be a proud mother watching her son make name for himself. She wondered idly if Irika had done this on purpose, and when she snapped herself out of her musing she found she had drabbled flowers and indeterminable geometric shapes all over the paper. She replaced it with a sigh. She couldn't outright lie, of course that would be discovered. Even omissions would be bad news for her. But maybe she could not omit things in a way that made them look more regular than they actually were. I have assisted Uzumaki Naruto in taking care of the business he took control of after Matsuzaki Eriko, look Jiraiya-sama's contacts, T-Country for further reference, was forced to take sick leave after he suffered a heart attack and was ordered rest. Uzumaki-san has also made an effort to benefit the local community by helping to establish a no. By taking action to establish a fire brigade. That was good. That was public-minded and respectable and in no way implicated breaking cover even though that was what had actually happened. Marino Idate was easy a member of the Wasabi family, Ibiki himself would help her cover that one. The Miss Trio became immigrants from the water country. There was her report all technically speaking accurate and intentionally misleading. This wouldn't fly if not for Jiraiya-sama, of course, not in 100 years. But Jiraiya-sama wouldn't want troubles for Naruto and so he would have to keep her out of trouble as well. We are heavy, aren't we? She asked from the empty room. You have to take responsibility of a lot of people with a lot of baggage. But it's weight you carry well. I don't think your dream of becoming a Hokage is so far-fetched as many think. She could see him standing there in front of him, in that silly orange jumpsuit, flushing a little and scratching his head in a bashful manner, grinning like the sun. Was she a mother figure or a loyal follower at this point? A friend like Naruto would prefer to see it or something else entirely? In a complicated world sometimes the simplest things were the hardest to describe. She didn't feel entirely easy, not easy at all, in fact doing this, but at least she could honestly tell herself that she was no traitor. And sometimes it was better to break the rules than not break them. Mizuki had never given her a child and she didn't know if she would ever have any. But in a way the winner had taken the spoils. Tsubaki was kind of like mother and it was all thanks to the one who had beaten Mizuki. It was a shock to her, the way some tight, painful no relaxed in her chest and how free and good it made her feel. Children. Naruto didn't really notice the wary looks he received from the Makamura citizens because he was so used to be looked at funnily. Familiarity may breed contempt, yes, but contempt also breeds familiarity and mostly he didn't bother to wonder what he had done now to deserve it when a mother with a baby crossed the street when he walked towards her on his way home. The Makamura adults readily acted accordingly to his expectations. But much to the horror of their long-suffering parents, Naruto had gained a small following of children who thought he was the coolest thing ever. It started with the little girl in yellow yukata whose cat he saved after it had climbed up a torii. The girl played a lot in the park and of course she had told her friends of the nice Nissan. Being called Nissan made Naruto feel kind of old, but when little Risa-chan was upset that her friends called her a lying liar, hem on fire, he climbed up a tree for the lot to prove he could. Then there was a little boy that one of the girls took pity on, little Hiro-kun from the poor side of the town who ran outside without shoes and who was much too thin. Mariko-chan started feeding him and she asked Naruto if Hiro-kun could run some simple errands for the constructors. After that Hiro told the rest of the kids he saw following Naruto around where to find him and before he could say frog Naruto was up to his eyebrows in little kids. He didn't mind it, just made some clones and had them play ninja with his little fans. The adult, now, they were on red-hot pins and needles. They told their children that Satu was a bad man and they should stay away from him, but only the most obedient few actually did. Naruto obviously wasn't a man, so why did they go calling him so? And he wasn't bad because he played with them even though he was one of the big kids, he could be a team of his own and he smiled all the time and never shouted at them, so obviously their parents were wrong. Naruto was thought to be a Yakuza leader before his first week in Makamura was over. He only started to wise up to the fact that something funny was going on day 15 when a new kid joined the group. Satu Atsushimiru, that poor boy, what had his parents been thinking? Just so happened to share the surname with his alter ego, the most common surname in T-Country. He was tiny and had a gap where one of his milk teeth had fallen off, his smile was devastatingly cute and he tried to bite Naruto when he said so. Naruto liked him immediately. It wasn't the real Naruto, but one of his clones and they were in a park when a young, harried-looking man in a police's uniform ran to them. Atsushimiru, please come here. We need to go home, he pleaded with his son and extended his hand, walking towards them so slowly now, as if to not startle some wild beast. So you are Marukoan's father? I'm Sata Naruto, it's nice to meet you. He grinned and extended his hand. But his grin dropped when he realized that the man's face was gray and sickly, and even his lips had lost all color. Birth. While Naruto was getting confused and suspicious, Naruto was busy trying to avoid getting glue in his hair while he was changing the wallpapers in the ex-whorehouse, with the help of himself, the girls, Miwa-chan and Idate. How are the girls' lessons going? He asked Idate. He had asked his friends to give his fire brigade some taijutsu training to enlarge their chakra stores to make learning jutsu easier. After that, the other girls had gotten into it as well because life could be dangerous in a big place like Makamura and self-defense was always good. He couldn't stay here forever to protect them, but he and Idate could teach them to protect themselves. The girls would probably get to genin level at most even if they practiced dedicatedly even after he left, but that was plenty enough against normal muggers and creeps. They are very motivated, Idate answered and looked up from where he was kneeling under the window. He was making doubly sure the boring neural brown and white rolls color matched by unrolling a length of each and checking them against the others in good light. We do our best, of course, one of the girls shouted from the ladder. They were in the lobby, the biggest room in the whole house. There wasn't much light because the windows were small and she was hanging a new lamp from the ceiling. We are going to make you so proud of us, another one, Yuriko-chan was her name, promised with low, lilting voice as she walked past him. She was carrying a bucket of glue and wearing an ugly gray apron, but she smiled like the sun and when she touched his hand, Naruto blushed a little bit. Anything for you, Naruto-kun. The girls really liked to tease him. It was kind of embarrassing, but at least Ero-sensei wasn't there to rib him to death over it. I think we should have a small party once this work is done, Naruto-kun. To celebrate your new enterprise, Miwa-chan said. Her voice was happy, but she was glaring kunai after Yuriko-chan. That would be great, Idate said faithfully and handed Miwa-chan a new roll. We could shop for supplies together. I haven't seen that much of Makamura yet. This enterprise was worth a party, hell yes. It was named the Sata Corporation because he wasn't supposed to tell anyone his real name, but Naruto knew it was named after him. First a bridge and now a corporation. He knew that this was the birth of a great legend. He just had that feeling, like a storm gathering in the horizon, and Naruto had never been afraid of storms. He wouldn't admit to a foxy grin, but it had a lot of teeth. Death. Doi Hirataiki was plotting treason. As a Kiri hunter nin, he knew precisely how difficult it could be to escape from the village. From the moment on you walked through the doors of the Kirigakure Ninja Academy, the village owned you, body and soul, and you only got out in a body bag. Now, Mizushima Kanatsu and her brother weren't such trouble. They weren't even truly graduated, they weren't worth much investigation. He could simply write home and tell there were now 2 nameless graves in Tea Country and that would be the end of it. He himself was a different case. It was a game of wait. He had to play time until Sannin Jiraiya returned and he could defect properly to Naruto's superior officer and be entered in Konoha's registry on probation. After that he would cease to be Kiri's internal problem and become lumped in with the greater problem called Konoha. It would make him not safe, precisely, but safer. If he was lucky he would manage to squirm his way into that comfortable niche where he wasn't worth the trouble trying to get to him would be. He was a hunter nin, but he hadn't made name for himself. The world at large wouldn't know or care that Doi Hirataiki was no longer a shinobi of Kiri. His former village wouldn't lose face. But before he could get to that, he still had a little less than 50 days to last, which meant he needed an excuse to remain in Makamura. What are you doing? Tsubaki asked, walking behind him. Taiki wasn't entirely at ease with his back turned to someone who regarded him with such suspicion, but it couldn't be helped, and in this strange little commune and its unofficial hierarchy the Konoha Jounin outranked him. Trying to come up with a good lie, he answered honestly, staring at the white paper in front of him. They were in the safe house and tried to spend their time, waiting for Naruto to return from the building under reconstruction. Well, he was waiting and Tsubaki was keeping an eye on him, the only one beside Naruto who had a chance against him in a single combat. I see, Tsubaki sighed and sat back down. Taiki had a feeling she really did. He could be investigating something that had potential to be a threat to Kiri but not so big a threat he would be sent back up. Something that required time to properly investigate, something that had some relevance to Kiri even from tea country. Maybe a cult would do the trick? Something to do with the Jinchuriki. Now that he'd gotten an inspiration, the plan came together with ease. The cult preached world peace and universal love, so it wasn't an immediate threat, but the word Jinchuriki always rated vigilance. The cult leader taught that the Jinchuriki were in fact living saints who protected the world from the Biju and would one day lead the elemental countries to an era of peace and prosperity. A statement which was laughable to anyone who knew anything about the Mizukage, who knew how the other villages used their living cages as living weapons, but what could you expect from a backwater nut job guru? And he simply required a few weeks to properly infiltrate the cult to ensure it truly was as harmless as it sounded. His pen danced across the paper. Now Konatsu and Kid were dead and he had joined a cult. All in a good day's work. Sunrise. Jiraiya was sitting cross-legged in a small, dirty room, drinking sake and wondering how his errant student was doing. He knew that Yumino Irika wouldn't have graduated a complete dunderhead and that tea country was as safe a place as they came outside Konoha's walls, but this was Naruto. He had long since come to the conclusion that Naruto's good luck at gambling was some karmic recompense for his abysmal luck in life. If there was an accident, incident, attack or catastrophe happening within 5 miles of Naruto, he could be counted on to get caught in the crossfire. This theory didn't explain how Tsunade Haim could be so unlucky, but he was convinced that karma just was a bitch who had it in for the Sannin. Jiraiya hadn't been there for Naruto when he was a kid. Partly this was because he had been honestly dreadfully busy, but partly because watching someone who was so much like Minato and Kushina at the same time had been painful and he had a lot of experience in running from pain. When he had accepted Naruto as a student, he had intended to make up for his past neglect and care for his friend's son, and of course IWA of all places had to start acting up. Iwagakure wasn't precisely at the peak of their power now either, having yet to fully recover their strength from the losses of the last war, which was the only reason they hadn't attacked Konoha yet, after the Chunin exam invasion. That kerfuffle had sent very mixed signals to the hidden villages. On one hand, if a village was strong enough that an invasion of 2 villages and one of them a member of the Big Five could be crushed in an afternoon, that village was obviously strong. On the other hand, a village that had lost its Kage had to be weakened. It had taken him a few weeks to find out that there was a lot of plausible deniability going on in IWA right now. That Tsuchikage wasn't officially aware of the plans of some of his elite jounin at all, and if things fell through he could declare them missing nin and call it a day. Ah, politics. That was one mistress that liked her whips, chains, blindfolds and gags. Maybe a new Ika about a few IWA jounin who bore completely coincidental resemblance to certain IWA high-ups and a busty, kinky noblewoman dominatrix. That stuff always sent the Tsuchikage up a wall. The second best part about writing porn was all the barely veiled insults you could throw. With plausible deniability, of course. This particular situation was about unnamed IWA personage contacting a missing nin for a job. Completely unremarkable, unless you suspected said missing nin of being part of Akatsuki. Jiraiya was fairly certain that IWA wasn't up to date with that, but this didn't make the situation any better. Akatsuki, Red Dawn, the bane of his and more importantly Naruto's existence. Here's to you, Naruto. Wait some more weeks yet, he said and toasted to the empty room. The sunrise wormed its way in through the tiny window and painted golden red patches on the off-white walls. He was just drunk enough that it felt very symbolic and meaningful. Now if only his faithful network would bring back some news from Makamura, but Matsuzaki had been suspiciously quiet. Oh, well, no news was good news, surely? To hell with optimism, maybe he should write Tsunade and ask for a report. Sunset. That same day Mizushima Konatsu celebrated being dead with her brother. The sun had set on their old life and new was still hiding behind the horizon. The private party included a huge bowl of takeout ramen, courtesy of their new boss who was completely addicted to the stuff, apple dumplings courtesy of Miwa and a fresh batch of apple bombs in her scroll, these set to explode on impact, and tea with just a touch of sake, courtesy of Tsubaki-senpai and herself. In Kiri, when you were old enough to kill for the village, you were old enough to drink, and if you drank enough to kill your liver or to get yourself killed in a prompter manner, you were obviously too dumb to live anyway. Alcohol-assisted gene pool cleansing. Konatsu wasn't that stupid. She had added to sake directly to the boiling water, and boiling destroyed alcohol, only leaving the fong of the taste behind. Her liver was going to remain completely virginal until she hit 16, and so was her brother's if he didn't want his head bashed in. It was a matter of luxury to her, to be able to afford to basically throw away alcohol that comforted her. "Are we going to stay here, Natsu?" Kid asked and leaned back against his arm, watching the sun set behind the roofs in a fiery red and amber ball rather than her. The house didn't have much in the way of a porch, but it was a good place to sit on all the same. The ground still hadn't recovered from the beating it had received when Naruto had taken on Taiki, and Konatsu felt her mouth twitching at the memory. "For now at least. This isn't a bad place to regroup," she promised breezily. They had gotten out with their lives. She still had a hard time believing it had been this easy, but they were in a peaceful, uninteresting country, under the wing of a very powerful if somewhat special young shinobi who was a student of one of the Sannin. They had a job that would pay for lodgings of their own in a few months' time, and they were officially dead. Really, it could only be better if they could somehow safely rub this to their father's face, but alive was better than petty satisfaction. "That's good. I like it here, and some of those girls show real promise," Kid said and sipped his tea. It was true that they weren't all horrible, and in time they would be pretty decent fighters for civilians. Being a fire brigade intendant wasn't what she intended to do her whole life, but she would keep practicing with Taiki and whip those girls up to shape and see then what she wanted to do with her life. Who knew, maybe in a few years' time Naruto would have some real combat work for her to do. And maybe he would be up for fling when they were older. Konatsu wasn't infatuated like some of his rescues, but he obviously had good genes and their baby would be kick-ass. She was going to say something nice and inane when a voice that rattled the newly fixed windows sounded from the house behind their backs. "What you mean? They think I'm a Yakuza boss." "Oh dear, somebody clued him in," Kid laughed. He hadn't been too keen to tell Naruto what people really thought of him, and neither had Konatsu, if only because watching the misunderstandings breed new, fascinating misunderstandings had been so much fun. "So do you think we should tell him he's a cult leader too?" she asked. The conversation inside was going on at lower volume now, and they couldn't quite make out the words through the closed door. "Maybe we should leave that to another day?" Kid proposed and toasted her. The tea was only lukewarm now, but something still warmed in her stomach. It was a nice, temperate night and she was feeling very mellow. "I will make friends with them and show them I'm not a criminal. This is a promise," Naruto declared, now clearly heard through to door. Konatsu almost snorted the rest of her tea up her nose at the thought of how that would go down, and Kid honestly giggled. "How about we make a bet, Natsu?" he proposed. "How many people will beg for their lives before Naruto is through befriending them?" She watched Kid smile, Kid laugh, Kid live. Kid, who had been bullied for his unisex name up to the point when he stabbed one of the bullies with his practice kunai, Kid who had the will to live, but not the skills to fight her. Her brother would live, now. Just for that she would have 2 kick-ass babies and give one to Naruto. Too much. Yamamoto Takumo was a frustrated man when he returned home after yet one more day of futile attempts to find something they could arrest Sata Naruto over. After the initial bloodbath had ceased, there had been rather annoying lack of obvious lawbreaking. Oh, he didn't suspect for a second that Sata did engage in drug dealing, money laundering, and extortion, though for some reason he appeared to have very dim view on prostitution. It was truly obvious that he had ninja background, for never before had it been this difficult to find even the least credible clues of organized crime going on. A part of him was even happy it was so difficult. At least for now he didn't have to wonder how they could arrest the boy man. Being so pathetically happy about this didn't make him happy at all. "That bad today?" Reiko asked, peeking through the kitchen door. She was wearing a pink apron with print that read "Kiss the Cook." So he did, and immediately felt a little better. "It's good to be home, dear." "Where's Ruka-chan?" he asked and allowed his shoulders to relax. Wonderful scent of fish and ginger wafted from the kitchen. "She's sleeping in her cradle, finally. She's been very restless today. I think she may be teething," Reiko answered and gestured him to sit down. It was a wonderful scene, domestic, comfortable, intimate. Of course it was too good to last. There was a firm knock on the door, and when Takumo opened, the polite greeting words turned to ashes on his mouth as he behold the cheery visage of one Sata Naruto with basket in hand. "Sata-san," he stammered, his thought turning to his wife and his little girl, too young to even understand what kind of danger her father had put her in. How foolish he had been. Just because old Saihara had never attempted to have him killed didn't mean a shinobi would think such an action more trouble than it was worth. Hi, I'm Sato Naruto and you are Yamamoto Takumo, right? It's nice to meet you, can I come inside? Sato was all sunshine and smile as he slipped by Takumo, without bothering to wait for permission. There were two people at his back, a girl and a boy approximately the same age. Both of them were so small, but they carried blades openly and walked with the deadly grace of a really big cat. And you are Yamamoto-san's wife, right? Here, this is for you. Sato presented the basket to his lovely, brave wife. Reiko's face was pale, but her mouth was a determined line as she accepted the gift. There was a bottle in the basket and a small paper package, probably full of some dry goods. Reiko thanked him with a voice that only trembled a little and Naruto turned back to face him. So, I found out you have these really funny ideas about me, he started, and Takumo broke there and then. Please don't, there are plenty of crimes to busy myself with in a town the size of Makamura. Please leave my family in peace. He had never begged for mercy in his whole life, but never before had his family been threatened. If only it was just him, then he could spit at the shinobi Yakuza's face and at least go down with his honor intact. The hate he felt for himself over what he had just offered burned in his stomach like raw alcohol, but even he had his price. The thought of his family dead or worse, and he knew that any Yakuza worth his first Ryo could come up with ever so worse, was just too much for him to bear. I didn't mean it like that. Sato protested and his face twisted into a very convincing facsimile of hurt, and the unnamed girl whispered something to the boy that sounded like first time. That didn't sound promising at all. I'm going to befriend you. Not enough. At first Naruto was at a loss as to how he would convince the chief of police of his innocence, exactly. Usually showing people you were strong enough to kick their ass at least got them to listen, but he couldn't very well fight a civilian that just wouldn't be sporting. It would be like Niji beating up Hinata-chan. After doing something like that he would need the corrective kick to the behind. In Konoha, asking someone to train with you was what you did when you wanted to make friends, at least for the ninja. Naruto was pretty hazy on how the civilians did it, as he'd never had a civilian friend before he started taking C-rank mission outside the village, and their befriending people mostly involved defending them. He had never gone to a movie before. Kakashi-sensei ordered his team to watch the Princess Fune movie just before their totally awesome mission where he got to save his first princess, and friendly activity to him was a training spar. Eating together was friendly, he did it with Iruka-sensei, but he wasn't in the habit of going to cafes or restaurants no one could outright refuse to accept him in, but the service was usually cold enough to frost over his eyebrows. Friendship and martial arts were practically the same thing in Naruto's life. Eventually he had just decided to soften things a bit, tone them down. You know I'm training a fire brigade, right? Well, the great Naruto Fire Brigade hereby challenges the Makamura Police Department to a sports day. We will have all kinds of competition, like hitting the bullseye and swimming in races, and I'm not even letting Idate compete in that because it would be unfair. It will be fun. And friendly. Yamamoto and his wife were staring at him. Their eyes bugged, their mouth hung open just a little. Naruto was used to funny looks, but these were the sort of funny he had gotten from Kiba when he once proposed they should glue the practice kunai to the ceiling back in the academy, like what he just proposed was just plain too silly for words. He frowned and wondered what it could be. Maybe Yamamoto thought that girls competing against his police was foolishness? A small storm cloud begun to gather over his head as Naruto considered that possibility. If it was so, then he would ask Tsubaki-chan and Kanatsu-chan to take part as well and kick everybody's asses, just out of principle. This was something everybody learned at young age in hidden villages. Being told you fought like a girl was no insult, and the girls were ready to prove it. Anytime. Being told you fought like a fangirl was a different thing entirely, but even that one insulted non-fangirls much more than it insulted boys. Is this some kind of gender prejudice thing? He asked. Because there is nothing wrong being a female. Half of humanity is female. Your wife is a female. You don't want to insult her, do you? Yamamoto looked suitably panicked at this thought, though he was still gaping. His wife, whose name he hadn't heard yet, had closed her mouth and tilted her head a little. She looked at him really hard, like she was trying to see through him like a Hyuga. It was kind of unnerving, and Naruto rubbed the back of his head, grinning sheepishly. So, it appeared that convincing the police that he wasn't a criminal wasn't enough. He also had to convince them that girls weren't weak. Well, his girls were up to the task, and Yamamoto's wife would probably make him sleep on the couch as punishment for his chauvinism anyway. The thought left him feeling that warm satisfaction he got after a job well done, especially if Irika-sensei or Kakashi-sensei or even Ero-sensei, for that matter, praised him. He was going to make the world, or at least Makamura, a better place to live one idiot at a time. Sixth sense. Some things can't be quantified, Yakushi Nono once told her surrogate son. Cut a human down to the atomic level and you still won't find love or loyalty or soul. Some things can only be sensed. Sometimes even ninja have to make do with ordinary postal services. Doihara Taiki didn't have a summon contract or any sort of ninja animals, so his letter traveled 2 days over the waves in a postal ship. Its destination was a small port town named Hakusucho, because, so the old tale said, there the wind blew the water white. In Hakusucho, a Kiri agent who went by the name Akira sent on the heavily encrypted report. Unknown to his village, though, the lowly Chunin who felt himself underpaid and undervalued was also part of certain infamous sound leaders' information network and diligently copied every word. He couldn't break the signet, but he had a simple tool that consisted of 2 sheets of glass and a bright lamp under them. He slid the envelope between the layers and turned the lamp on, reading the letter through the paper. It wasn't easy, as the paper had been folded and the kanji overlapped, but he managed with the aplomb of long practice. As the report hadn't been stamped as either busy, classified or for eyes only, it waited 2 more days in the small Hakusucho outpost for the round of a courier nin. The original and the copy both reached their destination 7 days after they had been sent, one in Kiri's mission office and the other on the table of Oto Geikira's head of intelligence, one Yakushi Kabuto. When the Mizushima family hosted a small, sedate gathering to celebrate that the honor of their family had been redeemed through very final means, Kabuto knocked on the door to one of Orochimaru's laboratories. He had picked this moment on purpose. Orochimaru was always distracted when the statistical analysis of the use of different recombinant viruses for gene transfer. "What is it, Kabuto?" Orochimaru asked with an impatient voice from behind the closed door. Kabuto opened it and stepped inside. The laboratory was blindingly white and blindingly brightly lit. Jars greeted him with a colorful glow as the light reflected off green and amber liquids inside. They held organs, hearts, lungs, eyeballs, brains. But today the room was dominated by color-coded files full of raw data from the current experiment and the statistics from several previous ones. Orochimaru graced him with a stern look as he flipped through a couple of different pages on several ledger sheets in 2 different ledger books spread over a side table. "Orochimaru-sama, I have received an intelligence report that I believe demands my presence in T country," he intoned smoothly and bowed his head respectively. Orochimaru's modus operandi was to find the downtrodden and the abused, the diamonds in the rough, and then claim their absolute loyalty for himself. Their only worth in their own eyes was that which they could give to their Orochimaru-sama, but nothing comes for free. The cost of this tactics was that cynical, naturally suspicious Orochimaru had become highly complacent in his faith in his followers' loyalty. Oh, the irony. "Do as you feel you must," Orochimaru snapped in clear dismissal and turned back to his papers. Kabuto didn't smile even behind his back. Ordinarily it wouldn't be quite this easy, but right now a bomb going off in the corridor would be only an annoyance to the Shodame Otokage. Kabuto felt a strange sort of fulfillment that he thought he would rather like to explore some more. Granted, the report mentioned Sata Naruto, but Kabuto had developed a good eye for details and even better intuition over the years. A Jinchuriki cult and Naruto in the same sentence were too big of a coincidence. It was like some benign spirit had whispered to his ear, like he was a yumemi, a dream gazer, whose dreams whispered of true things. He was completely, absolutely certain that Naruto was recalling him at long last. "Maybe I should take the Uchiha with me," he proposed. He has been demanding lately. And demanding was the last thing Orochimaru wanted now. He pushed his glasses up his nose, allowing the glint of light on glass to hide the tiniest hint of glint in his eyes. This was the greatest proof Orochimaru was taking him for granted. The snake Sannin didn't even hesitate. Smell. Onotsubaki's letter left in a post cart the same day Doihara Taiki's left in a postal ship. The letter reached a small Konoha outpost in the Fire Country in 5 days' time, after which it only took 1 day for a messenger hawk to fly it to the village. The report hit the mission desk just before the end of Yumano Irika's shift, who read it through and smiled, satisfied that Naruto was enjoying his downtime and getting along with the locals well. Really, a fire brigade. He was growing up nicely. Danzo got a copy of the report as per his orders to keep him informed of everything and anything that concerned the Jinchuriki the next morning, and he knew something smelled fishy there. He was Konoha's unofficial, but also undisputed champion of circling around the truth in his reports, both written and verbal, in a way that made the poor concept faint from the vertigo. He couldn't put his finger on any single word or sentence, but the whole practically screamed plausible deniability. Together with Jiraiya's letter, which asked for news about Uzumaki since his informant in Makamura had not reported to him, the stench reached to high heavens. Was Ono in league with Orochimaru after all? Had Uzumaki been turned or captured? Sandaime had been entirely too trusting with the woman, and Godame had followed his unfortunate example. "Your name for the purpose of this mission is Sai," he told the young shinobi, ID Route 522, who was kneeling in front of his desk. "You have successfully completed a C-class escort mission, the details of which are in this file. On your way to Konoha, you will stop in Makamura and surreptitiously make contact with Uzumaki, assuming he is still in the town, and find out his true circumstances there. Be prepared to eliminate Jounin Ono if she shows signs of treachery." He presented a manila folder and his operative rose from the floor to accept it. "Yes, Danzo-sama," his operative said, and stood there alertly, yet his body language subtly submissive. The pale face was like a porcelain doll's, perfect and perfectly emotionless. Danzo frowned. The root-raised operatives were his most loyal subordinates, most trusted as far as he trusted anyone, and that was the reason he had picked one of them for the mission. Uzumaki had in the past showed remarkable ability to establish rapport and compromise people with similar past experiences to his own, and Danzo wanted to keep the common frame of reference as small as possible, hence the very opposite of Uzumaki, one raised with harsh discipline, with no purpose beyond the mission and Konoha's best, one whose steel hadn't been chipped and dulled by the senseless prejudice of people. No personal tragedies ever occurred en route because nothing was personal there, not even their own selves. The downside to this, though, was that the root-raised were rarely apt at faking humanity. "Smile," he ordered, and the operative's mouth curled upwards and he allowed his eyelids to slide closed. Danzo had to hold back a grimace. "Practice that in front of a mirror and purchase a book on human interaction. You are not to allow the target to engage in ethical debate with you under any circumstance. Do you have questions?" The operative correctly took this as a dismissal and left, leaving Danzo to the rest of his reports. Jiraiya suspected several high places Iwagakure Jounin of working together with Kakuzu, an S-ranking missing nin of Taki Geikir who was now suspected of being a member of the elusive Akatsuki. Their goal appeared to be to assassinate a high-ranking genin team leader with political connections and framing Tsunade for hiring Kakuzu, apparently in hopes that Suna working together with the man who tried to assassinate Shodame after the Chunin exam invasion would sufficiently enrage Konoha to fully commit to a new war. Jiraiya had narrowed the possible targets down to Sarutobi Asuma and his team based on the fact that he was Sandaime's son and his genin were all future leaders of their influential clans. This would have to be dealt with, but the situation might be a possibility as well. After all, more than one person could play the game of framing. He had for some time kept an eye on a young IWA Jounin called Deidara. He was a class already and had the potential to reach S-class status within few years, much too dangerous an asset to allow for IWA to keep. His spies had reported that the young Jounin was somewhat emotionally unstable and apparently involved in a codependent relationship with a young Chunin of his village. Maybe if the girl was to die and it appeared Kakuzu's work, it would drive him to blame his Kage and teacher? There were definitely possibilities. So Danzo concentrated in turning a bad situation advantageous to Konoha the best he could, trusting that the Uzumaki situation was under control at least for now. He might have been a little less confident had he known that the book the newly named Saibot was Personhood, the Art of Being Fully Human, an opus which, despite its name, was not a psychology book at all, but a religious one about enlightenment of soul, written by a leader of a small free love practicing cult. Sound. That same day at Makamura, the Fire Brigade girls were preparing for the sports festival the next day, with the help of the inn girls and the casino boat girls. Since it had taken Naruto that long to get the approval not only from the police chief, but also the mayor and the Makamura Municipal Council, the event ended up conjoined with the opening day of the two brand new inns in the town. Tourists were enjoying the excitement and the locals were running in frightened circles. Miwa had never thought herself the sort to enjoy pettiness, but she was having grand time watching them fretting over the kindest, gentlest person she had ever known. Tents were being set up, the arena was being prepared near their normal practice ground on the beach, and some of the girls were baking in preparation for the festival. Move it to the right a bit now, it's good, she ordered around some of her friends on where to put the podium. She wanted to have a beautiful background for pictures, and rooftops peeking over the tree line would have ruined the scenery. Phew. Now it's all done. Yuriko wiped her sweat off and smiled at their accomplishment. She was Miwa's best friend and the one in charge of the new fire heart inn. Wind was playing with her long, black tresses, and Miwa wished for a moment that she could be as beautiful. Maybe then Naruto-kun would life sure has been grand lately, hasn't it? Yuriko laughed, and even her voice was alluring. Ah. Miwa-chan, you look fine. A voice called from behind her. Miwa turned to the direction of it and met the eyes of Marino Idate. He was carrying a small parcel wrapped in bright red silk paper in his hands, and he switched his weight from one leg to another. What have you got there? She asked and wondered what she might have ordered and then forgotten. Food was covered, so it couldn't be spices. They had the ribbons for the award ceremony, and the new uniforms had arrived just yesterday, and the parcel was much too small anyway, and Tsubaki-senpai was taking care of everything related to the finishing fireworks. I hope you like it. Let's eat together tomorrow, Idate said, thrust the parcel to her hands and disappeared from the place quickly, befitting the winner of the Todoroki Shrine race. Miwa raised an eyebrow and opened the rustling paper carefully. Inside was a baira, a long hairpin with metal strips attached by rings to the body of the pin. They tinkled pleasantly in the wind, and Miwa could only think, oh shit. Any ideas on how to let a guy down nicely? She asked. Yuriko Idate was a valuable member of their group, teaching them self-defense, and Miwa was sure his connections with the Wasabi family could be worth a lot later. She didn't want to estrange him, but saying no wasn't something she had done a lot before, and she was certain she could only come across as crude. She couldn't afford crude. Naruto-kun trusted her to handle his business. Miwa dear, I know you are head over heels for Naruto-kun, but have you at any point asked him about his age? Yuriko asked, and her voice was at once sympathetic and slightly amused. Ting-a-ling-a-ling went the baira, the noise of it filling the sky as Miwa's entire life came to a halt. She hadn't asked. But Naruto-kun was a shinobi, surely that earned him at least a few age points to go with the years. How old is he? She asked. It wasn't like she was that old either, just 16. 15, no trouble, and 14 would be kind of problematic now, but one more year and the difference would seem smaller already. Ting-a-ling-a-ling went the baira. 13. You didn't think I decided to forego the race for his heart because I don't like orange, did you? Her words were kind and kind of self-deprecating. Every word was clearly understandable, and the sentence even made sense grammatically, but the whole of it was madness. Just 13. Naruto-kun had taken out whole Yakuza family, taken out Saihara at the peak of his power and saved them all, had fought against that Kiri Jounin, which was the highest ninja rank aside from Kage if she had understood it right, and he was just 13. 13. Okay, so he was bit on the short side, but 13. This was like finding out the great Kami Izanagi was still in his diapers when he created the world. 13. Why are all the good ones taken, gay or 13? Miwa moaned to the high heavens and then winced when every head within hearing distance turned towards her. There really isn't any way to make that sound a little less perverted, is there? She whispered over the sound of the wind and the sound of her heart breaking a little. It was a lovely ornament, really, and he didn't want to offend Idate, but there was no way she could ever wear it now. Ting-a-ling-a-ling. Touch. Naruto loved festivals. New Year's Festival, Tanabata, the Konoha Cherry Blossom Festival, Hanami, and the Lantern Floating Festival, he loved them all. Even the Kyuubi's demise anniversary was dear to him now that he knew a bit more about why people were so much more horrid to him than normal that night. Today all Makamura would bear witness to the ultimate test of public-minded fitness, the Makamura Police versus the Great Naruto Fire Brigade Sports Day. The opening of the Fire Heart Inn and the peaceful rest in just made it that much better. Taiki and Kanatsu-chan had protested that peaceful rest sounded like a cemetery's name, but they had been voted to just be morbid like that. Kiri influence and all. It hadn't been easy to arrange either. It was enough to speak with the police chief, after that he had to G to the mayor. The mayor had then promptly entered Konatsu and Kied's begging count, and the Makamura Municipal Council had raised the count to 4 after he was sent there. Turns out that giving every police a free day the same day is a bad idea, and when people think you are involved in organized crime, no one trusts your Kage Bunshin to uphold the law. Don't worry, we barely approach organized on a good day, Konatsu had snickered, and Kied had thwacked her over the head. It hadn't helped at all. But now the day had come at long last. Tourists were strolling among the ramen stands and the confection stands, buying things and commenting how exotic it was that firefighting was a women's job here. Naruto's eyes picked Yamamoto from the crowd, and he made his way to the man. Yamamoto was looking around wild-eyed, and he jumped when Naruto shouted his greeting and grabbed his arm. When Naruto frowned, he grimaced, and that wasn't the purpose at all, but Naruto liked touching people. He was the kinetic type, like Irika-sensei had called him once. He learned best with his body rather than by reading or listening. He liked hugging people and clinging onto them. He liked the friendly shoves he got from his sparring partners after the spar and thwacks to the head from Sakura-chan. Praise always sounded the best when it was accompanied by a hand ruffling his hair too. Naruto knew it could be scary when people you thought were evil touched you. Kakashi-sensei had called it psychological warfare. But he didn't really have experience about that, since his enemies had never been the touchy-feely type, and it was easy to forget. "Come watch the kunai throwing competition," he asked, and kept his hold, dragging the man after him. This was all about making friends, so he should just act all natural. The girls won the first competition, courtesy of finding out about it a week before the fact and Tsubaki-chan's instruction. Their accuracy wasn't the greatest even at the short range, but they consistently hit the target and, more importantly, hit it with the blade of the kunai. The men in police uniforms hit it with the handle as often as with the blade, and the hit didn't count if the kunai didn't stay. It was a landslide victory, and the spectators, all tourists and his local child following, cheered as the girls jumped at each other's necks. They looked great in their new uniforms, a high-collared coat with tight, buttoned sleeves and pants with the ankles bandaged like a ninja's. "Huh, I guess you don't throw kunai here, this not being a hidden village?" he asked the police guy, deciding to be a cool and gracious winner. "You should, you can do cool things with them and senbon. I met this really strong ninja called Haku, he or she, it was kind of ambiguous, he dressed like a girl, but said she was he had this really strong ice bloodline and he could throw senbon, so it stopped Sasuke's heart and lungs and suppressed his chakra, but still didn't really kill him for good. Boy, I was scared he was dead for a while and I kinda lost it." This was when Naruto turned his face from the cheering, laughing girls to the man he was talking to, and he noticed that Yamamoto's face had gone decidedly ashen. Oops, he had forgotten Tsubaki-chan's golden rule of getting along with civilians, never talk shop. Ever. "But I didn't kill him. I mean, Haku did die, but he changed his mind in the middle of it, so I didn't do it. And I'm not helping myself, am I?" Naruto drooped. Kakashi-sensei had always told him to stop his rambling 2 sentences sooner. Now he had really messed this one up, but maybe if he looked pitiful enough the police chief would decide he wasn't all that scary after all. No one ever took him seriously when he made puppy dog eyes at them. Yamamoto was opening and closing his mouth like a fish on dry land, but couldn't seem to say anything. Naruto wanted to pat his hand comfortingly, but decided sadly that maybe their friendship hadn't reached that level yet. Taste. The sports day was, as far as Naruto was concerned, pretty successful. The girls were getting along with the policemen, even if one of them punched this long-nosed guy to the stomach for calling her a pretty little kitty cat. Yamamoto protested that wasn't getting along, looking really worried doing so, and Naruto pointed out she didn't kick him to the nuts, so yes, it was. The policemen won the race and the fire brigade won the fireman carry race, the police won the swimming competition and the long jump, and the firefighters the obstacle course. The score was even before the last competition of the day. After the obstacle course ribbons have been awarded follows the last competition of the day, Miwa announced through a megaphone. A wheelbarrow race. She twirled around on the stage that she had ordered constructed for announcing purpose. Naruto could see she was having a ball and was happy since she had seemed really sad that morning for some reason. Yamamoto made a funny choking noise and gave Naruto a look. "Hi, Taiki. There are no real wheelbarrows involved in this one," Naruto explained to the man who seemed to be searching for them. He had intended to make the last competition something really exciting, but first Hiro Koen had made puppy eyes at Mariko-chan and then Mariko-chan had made puppy eyes at Naruto, and he couldn't deal with puppy eyes as well as he could deliver. His mind always short-circuited at the first signs of sad, watery eyes, and then he'd begin to babble. That usually made the situation worse instead of better because the words weren't going through proper vetting and he wasn't all that tactful even under the best conditions. This was why he had quickly surrendered and agreed that yes, a wheelbarrow race was a great idea. The participants act as wheelbarrows. Well, half of them anyway, he explained. How they act like a wheelbarrow? Taiki asked, looking less than impressed. Act as an inanimate object? Maybe playing as a child went against the Kiri ninja way or something. So Naruto started to explain while the contestants arrived to the starting point. The policeman looked very red and embarrassed, the girls laughed. Someone was watching this through Naruto's eyes. Kyuubi sometimes took interest in the going-ons around Naruto. This had become much more obvious after the Four Tails fiasco that he still didn't want to talk about because he had almost killed Jiraiya-sensei. There didn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to why Kyuubi would watch this thing happen and not the other, but Naruto could feel something turning lazily within. Miwa-chan cracked the cymbals and after that everything happened quickly. Two of the police teams collided with each other before taking whole 10 steps and suddenly there was a groaning pile of 4 where it was hard to say which arm and leg belonged to whom. Naruto could have sworn he heard laughter, only not with his ears. I guess Kyuubi likes slapstick comedy. Who would have thought? He mused. Then again, anything that involved people getting hurt even a little was probably part of his portfolio. What? It was Taiki. His eyes were round and disbelieving. Kyuubi. You know, I'm a Jinchuriki and it just thought that was funny, he explained. He really didn't want to, now Yamamoto would be even more scared, but he had learned at young age that lying about things just made things worse in the long run. If you are good it can get you out of trouble you wouldn't have gotten in the first place if you were a little more upstanding, Iruka-sensei had said after he had told that Akamaru had eaten his homework. Akamaru had been very insulted and Naruto had apologized to him because Akamaru, a real puppy, was the uncrowned king of the sad puppy look. Yamamoto's expression didn't change a bit, but Taiki was a whole another thing. You? A Jinchuriki? He asked, and Naruto started to explain that he was sane and stable and completely non-homicidal, honest, but then Taiki already sat down right there on the ground, his face pale, and started sputtering something about a Jinchuriki cult and him being a cult leader. So you aren't a crime organization, but a cult? Yamamoto asked, his face the picture of relief universal to those who have just learned they can push a problem off to someone else to solve. Naruto could see he was kind of getting what he wanted, but not really at all. Victory was supposed to taste sweet, but even as the fire brigade took the victory of the last race and the whole competition this tasted like ashes. Because not our department. As long as you don't break the laws, you can be as cultish as you want, Yamamoto promised. We are a cult? Why doesn't anyone tell me these things? One of the girls asked from behind them, this time making Naruto jump. Riku was the oldest of them, easily over 30 years, a woman. And also really weird. It must have been all those years with the Yakuza. When is our next secret meeting? What deity are we praying to? Some sort of demon? What did Taiki-san say about you being a living saint? She fired away. Kyuubi, Naruto could tell, was laughing its furry ass off. This was the taste of ashes, going from being Yakuza to being a cultist. He had to make a report of this eventually and then Sakura-chan would murder him if Iruka-sensei didn't beat her to it. Iso did not need this sort of reputation. Sight. Tsubaki was there to see when the first of Naruto's fire brigade members managed her first water jutsu. It was the day after the sports day and the girls could be seen toting their trophy ribbons proudly, gold and white flagrant against their practice clothes, the worst rags they owned that they didn't mind getting wet, sweaty, dirty and torn. There was a spring to their steps Tsubaki hadn't seen before and she realized with a start that winning those competitions against much bigger men must have also won these girl women back something very precious, their self-respect. She had at that point learned 5 newbie class and 3A class jutsu, given several taijutsu lessons to Idate and had some of the best spars of her life ever with Taiki, and she had reached the conclusion that this trip had already made it to the top 3 of good decisions in her life. Second place. The uncontested number 1 was becoming Kunoichi back in the mists of her prepubescent past. She had also helped the girls with kunai throwing and some basic chakra molding exercises that Konatsu and Kid seemed to have little patience for being able to do and teach were two different things, and Tsubaki found herself wondering if she might be trusted enough to take a genin team anytime soon after the Mizuki fiasco. Now that relationship had made the number one bad, not good, absolutely terrible decision of her life. It was true that the Kiri duo had done much more for the students, as well as Idate, who had made them run in the sand to grow their stamina and chakra stores. Even then, she was proud as a mother hen with her new chicks when one of the girls spat a water bullet from her mouth. It was a rare gray day with wet clouds hanging low over the coast, and the air was practically alight with the tension of a storm that hadn't quite broken out yet, the wind blowing from the sea in fast, unpredictable torrents. Maybe the moist, thick air that gave the jutsu that last push it needed, or maybe it was the self-confidence boost that did it. Chakra was half spiritual energy after all. It was there for those to see who would. How there was so much more to them now. If happiness was light, the whole Makamura would have been lit up like a bonfire. Machika was a lovely girl to look at age 17 practically a woman already, with big doe eyes, elegant nose, and a kendo back, though in her case calling it a dancer's back might be more accurate. Yet even she didn't manage to look very becoming with her brown practice rags clinging to her skin with sweat and her hair plastered against her skull, her face red with exertion. But when the first bullet, a bit on the small side but still very cohesive and resilient, flew from her mouth for good 10 meters and hit an old, rusted through mooring pole and cleanly snapping it in half, it was a sight to see. Her silly, joyful grin illuminated the whole beach. "Wonderful, Machika!" Tsubaki shouted and applauded. The rest of the girls joined her, and Machika flushed even redder, now out of pleasure. And soon the rest of them practically doubled their effort, encouraged by the success of their friends. The sight of them, tongue peeking between lips and eyes crossing from concentration here and there, it warmed her heart. As a jounin, she was used to much less pleasant and considerably bloodier sights when she gazed upon the results of her efforts. That was it, she had decided. She was going to become a teacher even if it took her a decade to get approved. Yet one more thing this trip had earned her, and she was grateful. Shapes. Naruto knew something about love. It could take many shapes. Sometimes it was okay if you taunted a person if you didn't let anyone else do so. Some people shook their heads and wondered about why Naruto was so stupid about Sasuke, but Sasuke was his friend, despite of being an utter and total bastard about it at times. He called Naruto dead last, but there had been that one time after they became genin when Kiba did the same and Sasuke punched him. Aside from Irika-sensei, it was the first time someone shed blood for Naruto, that he was there to see. Kiba's nose bled quite a lot. That was friends with a total bastard kind of love. He made Naruto's nose bleed too later that day, but it was completely unrelated, so it was okay. Sometimes love took the shape of following after another person when they were being stupid just so that you could pick them up later when they fell. Shizune sure loved Tsunade-bachan a lot to go along with her all those years. Sometimes love was being at someone's side even at their worst time and making it all better. Irika taught this to Naruto, and Naruto honored the lesson by giving the same to Gaara with some beating added, but that was because it was Naruto and it was Gaara. Sometimes love was knowing when to be hard and when to be sympathetic like Kakashi-sensei did. Sakura-chan had her own brand of tough love too, while Tuchi and Ayam liked to feed him. And sometimes love was crazy-shaped and insisted that founding a cult was a great idea. "So you have the world's strongest demon sealed into you?" Riku-bachan asked him. "And it can't get away?" "Yeah, and no way it can get away." "Yondaime was the greatest seal master in the history of ever," Naruto protested. He had always admired Yondaime the same as everyone else, and while his regard had suffered a momentary lapse when he found out just why practically everyone hated him so, well, it was still better than Kyuubi killing everyone, right? At least now they were alive enough to hate him, and Naruto could win their acknowledgement one day. It would be tough going, but hey, he was a hero. Irika-sensei said so, that he was a hero for protecting everyone from Kyuubi, and Irika-sensei calling him hero was worth anything, period. Naruto never put it in words even in his own head, but sometimes love took the shape of undeserved forgiveness because the reason you were hated was also the reason someone gave you that love. The safe house wasn't as much that these days as it was headquarters for Operation Whatever. Everybody seemed to think that Naruto had some great master plan, but the truth was that he just did the right thing, and then other things happened that needed him to do something. The house was so full at every hour of the day that it was surprising when only Riku, Miwa and Tsubaki were there with him. "And you want world peace?" Miwa-chan asked coyly. She had been kind of down lately, but now she was teasing him, so everything was probably alright again. Of course. Isn't that, like, a requirement for not being a dick? Naruto hunched his shoulders, half expecting being hit for saying dick, but apparently Tsubaki-chan thought that if you were adult enough for Hitai, you were adult enough to swear. I guess worldly world is full of dicks then, she managed today even though her voice hitched. Naruto was certain that she was laughing her ass off inside. I think you fill the minimum requirements for a saint, then the first and last line of defense against the forces of darkness and world peace. I'm joining, Rikuba-chan declared with magnanimous air. Naruto choked on his own spit. I'm a shinobi. Shinobi can't be saints. He protested, thinking about Sakura-chan. She was so pretty when she was riled that Naruto felt guilty pleasure in knowing her. It always made her eyes glitter like green lightning or sharp green glass shards, so very prettily. But he was sure he didn't want to annoy her this much. Then what about Rikudo Sennin? Isn't he a saint as well as a shinobi? He said that war does not determine who is right, only who is left, and not in the political sense, I would bet, Miwa-chan pointed out. Naruto chewed on his lower lip. He had been mocked a lot and he usually knew when that happened. He could also usually tell when someone was honest, and this whole cult thing was a bit of both. On one hand they were jerking his chain, but on the other hand they had looked really impressed when he told them about Kyuubi and showed them the seal, and he wasn't used to people being impressed by that unless they were sealing nuts or something. They had looked at him like he just defeated a whole army by himself or turned rocks into gold or something. Well, I would rather be a cultist than a criminal, Rikuba-chan said primly. Besides, real ninja believe in world peace and eternal friendship through superior firepower, so that bit is alright. I can get behind it now. Tsubaki-chan wasn't laughing on the inside, she was laughing out loud. It should be said that Riku's only contact with ninja had been through Naruto. But maybe she wasn't so wrong if real was used as a synonym for admirable. Optimism was good for the soul after all. Triangle. Marino Idate was involved in a love triangle. It wouldn't have been quite so embarrassing or depressing if his rival wasn't a 13-year-old boy with a crush on his equally 13-year-old teammate and no idea Miwa-chan ever gave him a second glance. She had hounded his steps like a particularly well-trained dog, and if she hadn't been so obviously smitten, stupid people could have gotten really wrong impression of her character. Do you think yoga would be a good idea? Should we chant? She asked, kicking the leg of the counter she was sitting behind and scribbling on a page torn off from her account book. You realize that Naruto doesn't want a cult, right? Idate asked back, even though the image of Naruto turning beet red when a bunch of girls started chanting under his window was pretty damn amusing. But isn't it just right that someone acknowledge the service he is doing for the world? Miwa-chan asked, and scritch went her pencil, and while she talked to him she didn't even look up. She wasn't even wearing the Baira he had given her. What you think of these? Which one is better? She pushed the paper to Idate, who turned it around. There were two mantra, he thought, or maybe prayers. Apparently there was a difference between a mantra and a normal prayer, but damned if he knew what it was. Ninja weren't all that religious even one good day, because pretty much every religion with the exception of the Jashinism, which was for utter creeps, only had orders like thou shalt not kill and who wanted to be born as a cockroach in their next life. Better not to believe in the whole business at all. And after he left Konoha he became a merchant, and they weren't precisely the most devout people ever either, because money-making was bad for the soul too. But these two prayer things looked like something that was indeed chantable. We meditate on the worshipable power and glory of him who protects the world from the terrible Kyuubi no Yoko and who directs our understanding, and the one who sealed the beast into his belly. We meditate on the glory of the being who protects the world from the terrible Kyuubi no Yoko and who shall lead us all to light of understanding, and the one who sealed the beast into his belly. I think the second one is better, Idate managed to utter. Miwa-chan looked entirely serious as she accepted the paper back and read through the both options with critical eye. The bell over the door to the shop rang and Miwa-chan slipped the paper back between the pages of the account book, standing to serve the family who had walked in. All were very obviously tourists in their straw hats and yukata with Makamura sites printed on the fabric. This was the last week they would need to man the store at all, as someone named Sakuya had decided that Matsuzaki-san was in good enough health to show his face and face the music. Idate was kind of sad he was going to miss these peaceful afternoons in the shop with Miwa-chan. Miwa-chan, who was apparently sublimating her previously romantic feelings into religious fervor. He would better have some hand in forming the Narutoism, as the cult was for now tentatively called, if only to make sure it didn't require anyone to be celibate. Triumphing over a 13-year-old boy in a battle for a fair maiden's heart only on a technicality was kind of sad, but if he lost because Miwa-chan decided to become a nun for the said boy, he was going to murder somebody. Square. Naruto had sadly concluded that he was going to get blamed for everything, even though everything he had done had made perfect sense. Shikamaru had once said that 2 wrongs did make right. It maybe wasn't morally sound, but it made mathematical sense. Along the same vein, Naruto had decided that 2 rights made wrong, like this cult ballyhoo people were getting into, proved. There was no justice in the world. This was only proved further when there was a light knock on the door late in the night of his 28th day in the peaceful what a joke, town of Makamura. Everybody was already sleeping and Naruto was the one to wake up first and trot to the door barefooted. He rubbed his eyes sleepily as he opened it. Yakushi Kabuto was standing on the porch, smiling like a paper doll. "Good night, Naruto-sama. I'm sorry to bother you this late, but I thought it wise to not bring my luggage through the town in broad daylight," he greeted Naruto softly, like nothing ever happened at all. The moon was half-circle above them and his hair shone in its light silver and white like a ghost. For a few precious seconds Naruto just stood still as his mind tried to process what his eyes, ears and nose were telling him. It looked like Kabuto, it had the soft tones of his voice and his smell, a tang of something sharp and chemical and a hint of blood underneath, but Kabuto was Naruto's hands were forming Rasengan before his conscious mind caught up with them, but when it did, it approved. The light of it lit the porch and Naruto could hear several curses inside the house, knew that his chakra, tinged with Kyuubi's redandhati and pain, had awakened the whole house now. "Good. Who you came for now?" he shouted and struck. Kabuto leapt back with eerie grace, like quicksilver or a wisp of mist, and what was meant to hit his chest squarely hit the dirt of the yard instead, making a new crater to go along with the previous ones. Dust darkened the glow of the town's lights. "I came for you, Naruto-sama. I am the kind of person who keeps his promises, after all, and I made one for you," Kabuto said, his voice not alarmed in the least. It was pleasant, if anything, like he was chatting of weather. "Please do not try to kill me yet. I haven't been of any use to you at all. Let me talk first, you can always kill me later." That stopped Naruto where he stood for several reasons. The chakra he had gathered for another Rasengan wavered like a candle's light in wind and died, leaving their faces in shadows again. Something burned and clawed inside him, screamed how he had taken Sasuke team and left and Hokage Gigi was dead and Itoashi's fault kill him, the red haze of Kyuubi falling over his eyes, but he still wasn't striking. Time stretched like bubblegum, there was still time even though everyone inside the house was running already. "You can always kill me later?" Oh, not Kabuto too. What was wrong with people that they said such things? Besides going to Orochimaru, of course. That was always a bad idea. Yakushi Kabuto, missing Nin of Konoha. Tsubaki-chan's voice was slick like the oil used to polish swords and her blade made a thin noise as she slid it from its sheath. Naruto knew even without turning that Taiki was there too and he was dangerous, and Konatsu and Kid too. It was like weight strapped to his back, their killing intent. He raised his hand. Wait. It was hard to think over the roaring of Kyuubi in his ears, but he needed to keep his head now. Maybe there was something to this whole cult leader thing after all because everyone waited just because he told them so, even though he was sure that Taiki was plain mortified by the whole thing and Tsubaki-chan was amused. Kabuto smiled to him happily and that happiness wasn't like proper happiness at all. Nato didn't have the vocabulary to describe it, but it kind of made him hurt. "But still you took Sasuke," he accused. Kabuto had helped at it in any case. Enabled the whole thing. "I have brought him back to you," Kabuto stated and gestured with his hand towards the middle of the yard. There was the shape of a barrel, like one shadow amongst many. Something was draped around it, like charms in a temple. He didn't come peacefully. Naruto laughed. It was a stupid thing to do and everything was not okay at all, but the thought of Sasuke's indignant face when he was stuffed into the barrel against his wishes, it just made something inside Naruto explode in bubbly giggles. And maybe things would be all right in the end after all. Things needed to be fair and square. Kabuto had helped to take Sasuke away, but he had brought Sasuke back. Hokage Gigi was dead now, But it had been Orochimaru who had killed him. "Will you help me kill Orochimaru?" he asked. Kabuto had been his friend. He had hurt Naruto, true, but if he started holding hat against people, well. He wanted Kabuto back. Fair and square. Let's talk. Circle. There was a barrel in the middle of the living room and 6 ninja gathered around a table. The tea was hot and just bitter enough for Kabuto. Ono Tsubaki, one-time lover of the traitor Mizuki if Kabuto remembered right, was giving him glares that could almost set things to fire without the help of jutsu, but she also kept looking at the barrel. Doihara Taiki looked like he had a clue what this was about, the 2 Kiri children didn't. But Kabuto only had eyes for one person. "Is this one of those you didn't ask things?" Naruto-sama asked him. Yes, Kabuto answered unashamed and sipped his tea. It wasn't drugged, but he didn't hold that against Ono and Doihara. His arrival was certain to be a shock. He was sure they were usually savvier. "What you meant, I can kill you later. You don't want to die, do you? Why you say such things?" Naruto-sama asked and Kabuto blinked, off his guard. He had expected to be asked why, but not this why. Why he would die so easily? Why not? What is the point of living if I'm no one? If you don't want me, who I am? He returned the questions with his own. His pulse had elevated without his permission. Normally the control his medical techniques allowed him over his body was greater, but now he felt it slipping gently away under the suspicious, angry blue eyes. He couldn't even remember when he had been afraid of death, but this was a sensation he could remember, if only vaguely. He had been a child, in Nono's care, and he had been promised candy if he did well at test. He had passed, but not with the best marks, not even the 3rd best. Now things had come to a full circle and he was waiting with bated breath again, but this time the stakes were much higher than a piece of candy. Was 4th best good enough for Naruto-sama? He would die if necessary, but he didn't want to be disowned. "You are Kabuto. You are good at keeping secrets and too literal and kind of an idiot and a total jerk, but don't worry, it's not like I'm not used to that." Approval, acknowledgement, invitation. Naruto-sama stood up and walked to the barrel where his teammate slumbered. His face flickered like a mirage. Some concealed their feelings with a face like porcelain mask, but Naruto showed too much to interpret, flooding senses instead of denying them. A little sadness, a lot of determination and a mess of contradictions. "Okay, so we wake Sasuke up tomorrow and write to Tsunade Bachan we have got him and you are going to tell everything you know about Orochimaru. But first tell me what the hell messed you up like that. It isn't that hard to answer, right?" Naruto-sama demanded and turned around, his eyes charged like lightning, like the Chidori his teammate had displayed. "Naruto-kun, who can trust the color of a chameleon? This isn't sensible, we must detain him," Ono chided Naruto-sama gently, but he twitched, almost jumped. The silence of the 3 Kiri ninja could have been cut with a kunai, the silence of the night oppressing and the silence of the barrel even more so. Kabuto didn't understand much of feelings, but he had learned to recognize them, and that barrel was filled with what-ifs and maybes. The ninja lizard. "Your colors," Naruto-sama muttered and his hand hovered over Kabuto's. Kabuto wanted Naruto-sama to touch him, but he couldn't ask for it. It wasn't his place. The circle made him, the circle broke him, and it could make him anew and it would never stop turning. He owed Naruto-sama an answer. "You can bind me and seal my chakra if you wish. Shimura Danzo is the one who did this to me." He answered to both of them. Ono paled and her hands became fists, but Naruto-sama's face only displayed clear, unconflicted anger. The hand touched his moon. Where the energy flow begins is in the body of the material world. It moves freely through the body, if allowed, and expresses itself at times beyond the 5 senses. The human is a moon that reflects the sun, that is the divinity, a clear mirror, yet incomplete, reversed, flawed. When one learns to take the sensations of the flesh to the 6th sense, one can experience divine ecstasy. Sai walked down the street as the sun only begun to rise over the horizon. It was easy to read a book while walking so early when other senses didn't need to be extended to avoid colliding with other people. He wasn't quite certain about the book he had chosen to learn how to act like a human being. On one hand, he often felt like a mirror or a moon if one wished to use grand, wistful metaphors, merely reflecting what he saw others experience. On the other hand, he had never thought that achieving orgasm was so necessary to mental balance. If spiritual balance and soul were considered equivalent to mental balance, that was. It appeared to be a somewhat different thing, but the book lacked exact descriptions. Yet to become a moon, a mirror, was a useful thing for an infiltrator, and while he hadn't participated in the techniques described due to his young age and undeveloped body, he tried to embrace the ideal. To reflect what his targets were, what they wanted to see in others rather than what he really was. The shape of the moon was best recognized not in its whole self and not even in half, but as a crescent, a sliver. Surely his incomplete self could be recognized as true human as well if he only integrated the idea sufficiently. All his good intentions came to naught. When he arrived to the door of the safe house, a loud crash could be heard from the inside. Fearing Uzumaki was under assault, he broke in to meet a chaotic scene. The missing nin Uchiha Sasuke was lying on the floor, snarling at the Jinchuriki who was kneeling on his chest and pinning his arms to the floor. A table broken in half had been kicked around as had a barrel, and behind it stood a long-nosed man in blue garb, obviously armed. Jounin Ono sat by a wall with her hand on her sword's handle, her eyes sharp and hard as they turned towards Sai. And above this whole scene stood Yakushi Kabuto, a traitor to the root, and Danzo-sama, servant of Orochimaru. The Uchiha was under control and the smaller threat anyway, so Sai attacked Yakushi on the spot. Uchiha Sasuke had been a pretty big deal ever since the Uchiha massacre. The last Uchiha, the star pupil at the academy everybody expected big things from, the star pupil of Hatake Kakashi, or so it had seemed at first. But while he couldn't complain about the time the man put to teaching him, Naruto just kept catching up with him, inch by painstaking inch. And then there had been Gaara. The last time Sasuke had been so afraid had been that night, that terrible night when the brother he had always loved and admired stood above his parents' still warm bodies, his swords red and wet, dripping on the floorboards like a rain cloud. His mother had been quiet, but she sang in his memories, "It's raining, it's pouring. The old man is snoring." He could never forgive Gaara for making him feel that helpless again. Sometimes, in his dreams, there was no difference between the red moon and the red sand, and he could hear his mother singing, but she was so far away. He went to bed and bumped his head and couldn't get up in the morning. Such morbid songs for the once strong Uchiha, taken down by their own. The truth was that being a star pupil in the academy just meant that Sasuke was a big fish in a little pond, and being dropped into the bigger pond that was the whole of Konohagakure no Sato was a shock to his system he never quite recovered from. There had to be some fault in Konoha for making him weak, for he couldn't stand the thought that there might be a fault in him. He had sworn to leave that stumbling self behind him with the rest of Konoha, moved his team picture from one shelf to another, the one where he kept the pictures of his dead, and in a twisted sort of way the decision to kill his heart had worked. He had been ready to pay the price. To say that he was less than pleased when he realized his former teammate had managed to infect one of his new teachers with the friendship nonsense would be an understatement. He was, in fact, livid beyond measure, and that he was stuffed into a barrel again, this time against his will, did nothing to help. Inside he was more asleep than awake, only distantly aware that the barrel was moving. The grogginess persisted when the lid was finally pried open and strong arms dragged him out and pulled him into a basket hold. The sudden light stung, and everything was blurry in his watering eyes. His ears were ringing. He was helpless. Or was the hold a hug? And he could swear he saw a hint of those birthmarks under the floppy, obnoxiously yellow hair. Sasuke. You are back. Naruto. I will kill you. Sasuke struggled against his captor's hold and glared at Yakushi, that traitor. Yakushi looked distinctly pleased with himself, but then, he always did. That smug snake. I'm not going to let you hold me back, he snarled at Naruto and twisted to get one hand free, but the orange-clad idiot's arms were like bands of steel. Konoha only made me weak, like you. Gods, it's contagious. Somebody laughed in the background, and that made the noise in his head louder, shriller. His curse mark was burning like a brand freshly plucked from a fire. Now you're just being stupid. Orochimaru became strong in Konoha. Kabuto became strong in Konoha. Your brother became strong in Konoha. Just stop being stupid and come back home. It's not like you're really a missing nin or anything, Naruto insisted. Sasuke latched onto that last part, a clear sign that Naruto didn't know what he was talking about. And even though Itachi and Orochimaru were both Konoha-born and Konoha-trained, it was easy to ignore in the light of that one glaring falsehood. What you mean? I'm not really a missing nin. I tried to kill you, remember? By what Kakashi-sensei said, that would make me lower than trash, he reminded his former teammate, finally managing to work his arm into a position he could use to break the basket hold. And of course that dumb Naruto had to destroy all his effort by thrusting him arm's length away, making the maneuver unnecessary. Didn't he even know how to keep someone captive? Stop being so hard on yourself. Self-esteem is for everyone, you know? And I'm totally over that almost killing thing, so don't worry, Naruto said breezily. What do you mean, over it? You can't just be over it. That had been one of Sasuke's worst moments, the moment when he almost took the life of someone who was, sort of, his friend. And he hadn't even managed to do it in the end, making the whole thing a double failure, and if he wasn't over it, Naruto wasn't allowed to either, damn it. And there is nothing wrong with my self-esteem. You just called yourself trash, Naruto pointed out pleasantly. Behind his back an unknown girl covered her mouth with her hand, but not quickly enough to hide a smile. A boy by her side bit the ball of his thumb and Sasuke's already frayed temper snapped. He threw the annoyance against the table, which broke with a satisfying crash, but quickly as a snake, much quicker than he used to be, Naruto leaped back and pushed him flat on his back. I didn't say it. Kakashi said it. He shouted at the top of his lungs while Naruto just looked infuriatingly vague and worried. Yes you did. And Kakashi-sensei isn't even here. Did you hit your head when Kabuto stashed you in there? Naruto asked, and now the unknown boy was hanging from the girl's shoulder, his whole upper body shaking with silent laughter. Sasuke snarled wordlessly. This was when a boy wearing Konoha's Hitai crashed the scene and tried to kill Yakushi on the spot. Heart. When Naruto pressed a snapping, snarling Sasuke to the floor, he thought that this was the best day ever. He had gotten two of his best friends back in one fell stroke, and maybe Sasuke team wasn't yet fully on board with the idea, but Naruto was sure he could change Sasuke's mind. He was certain that his and Sakura-chan's worst failing the first go-round had been that they hadn't gotten enough words in edgewise quickly enough. This was the best day ever, and he was a bit afraid his heart would explode like a tag, just blam, and pieces of Naruto would be all over the place from sheer happiness. Then a strange Konoha shinobi crashed his party and attacked Kabuto. For a second Naruto was torn as he sat atop Sasuke, not daring to stand for fear that the jerk would just run away again, afraid that Kabuto was about to get hurt. Tsubaki-chan stood like she had been turned to stone, Taiki and Konatsu-chan and Kid all shifted, touched the handle of a sword or a kunai or pushed their fingers together, ready to flash through the hand signs of this or the other jutsu, but no one did anything. No one except Kabuto, who moved so quickly Naruto only saw a blur, and the simple fire jutsu the stranger had used hit the wall instead. Somebody put the fire out. He shouted, and Konatsu-chan turned around and spat the water bullet with the ease of one who has used the jutsu again and again and again over the course of the last few days. The floor flooded instantly. Naruto was spared from most of it thanks to his perch on top of Sasuke, but said duck but was starting to resemble a wet puppy instead, in the space of a few heartbeats. Let me up! Sasuke commanded him and pushed at his chest. It wasn't hard enough to move him, but maybe making Sasuke lie in what amounted to a puddle was a bit mean? Nah. What should I do with him, Naruto-sama? Kabuto asked as he dodged yet another strike. The words made the shinobi to look at Naruto sharply before jumping towards him, but now Kabuto struck again. There was a blur, but now it ended with a meaty thump and a pained groan, then splash when the pale boy hit the floor, but stood up immediately. Please, Shinobi-san, this isn't what it looks like. Yakushi Kabuto has defected from Orochimaru and offered us the Uchiha and information. Tsubaki-chan spoke quickly and took a half step closer to the boy, making a placating-looking gesture with her hands. The boy only frowned as he let his eyes move from Tsubaki-chan to Kabuto, then to Naruto and Sasuke, and eventually to the rest. No one made a move to attack him, only staring in a way that made Naruto grimace a bit from sympathy. That had to be uncomfortable. Ono Tsubaki, suspected of working for Orochimaru, he said flatly and pulled a sketchbook from his bag, along with a brush dripping with ink. Just a few months ago Naruto would have thought that totally harmless, but these months with Jiraiya had taught him what seals could be good for. Just don't kill him. Or terribly maim him. He shouted to Kabuto, adding that last bit because he had a feeling that Kabuto might need it. Then everything happened quickly. Everybody stating leaped aside, giving the fight on the way a lot of room. now pulling their blades as well, but still not attacking, and Sasuke struck him quickly as a snake, sending him crashing on the floor, and something rose from the sketchbook, something black that he couldn't really see from the corner of his eye because he was looking at Sasuke team and climbing back to his feet. Kid was closest to Sasuke now and he attacked with taijutsu. Sasuke blocked easily, but then Naruto was already coming at him. The curse markings climbed up Sasuke's neck and cheek like some disgusting skin disease. Sasuke struck towards his sternum in a way Naruto was sure was going to break something and hurt like hell even with Kyuubi's help. Ribs breaking and puncturing the heart or lungs were only cool when you were the one doing it, and so he jumped and blocked. The pain shot up his arm, numbness at its heels, but he didn't think anything had broken. He then threw a punch that Sasuke didn't even deign to block, muttering sloppy under his breath as he dodged Kid as well, aiming a kick towards the boy. The kick never connected. Kabuto was there so quickly Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin. Kabuto's hand glowed with sickly green light, and one tap, just one tap lighter even than the Hyuga Tenketsu hits, was enough. Sasuke hit the floor like a ragdoll, and Naruto noticed that Kabuto was carrying the stranger over his shoulder with ease. Now that he could really look, he noticed that the boy looked a lot like Sasuke. Kid was leaning against the wall and clutching his chest over his heart, looking like he wanted to accuse Kabuto of almost causing him a heart attack. A bad day for heart health all around. The situation is under control, Naruto-sama. I believe we should restrain at least one of them before they wake up to avoid a repetition of this, he suggested, and set the stranger down. And so they did. Naruto felt kind of crummy tying up Sasuke, but since he was the one who had run away before, well, precedent and all. The first thing the Sasuke lookalike said when he woke up was, "Were you attempting to engage in a tantric sex ritual with Uchiha earlier?" In their first show of united purpose in 4 months, Naruto and Sasuke both tried to strangle him. Sasuke's attempt was really good, Naruto thought as Taiki pulled them away, considering that his hands had been tied behind him, not in front. Even Lee didn't have that sort of legwork.